call to order the regular meeting of the Mount Pleasant City Commission, Monday, December 9th, 2024 at 7 p.m. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Mount Pleasant City Commission recognizes the Anishinaabe, whose ancestral lands the city stands upon today. We acknowledge the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe and recognize that the three bands of Ojibwe, Saginaw, Black River, and Swan Creek, have resided on this land for over 200 years. Our acknowledgement of the full history of the tribe and our commitment to be good stewards of these ancestral lands are an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those ancestors who came before us. We give thanks to the generous care with which the Anishinaabe and the members of the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe of Michigan have given and continue to give to this land and our community. Clerk, please take the roll.
Commissioner Bush? Here. Commissioner Chapman?
Here.
Commissioner Eke?
Here.
Commissioner Rollins?
Here.
Commissioner Wingard?
Here.
Vice Mayor Olsager?
Here.
Mayor Perschbacher?
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, since we have a quorum, we are going to continue. We're going to start out with the introduction of the grant coordinator. Manager DeSenz.
Good evening, everyone. I'm delighted to introduce a new member of our City of Mount Pleasant family, Lauren Baker. Lauren has been hired on as our grant coordinator. Lauren joins us from the State of Michigan Cannabis Regulatory Agency, where she was a financial analyst. Lauren brings with her a wealth of experience and knowledge, having graduated from Central Michigan University with a master's in public administration. Her background and skills will be invaluable as we continue to strive for excellence in our work and service to the community. With that, please help me in welcoming Lauren to the team.
All right, welcome, Lauren. Now we are here to introduce a paid on-call firefighter, Chief Lopsinger.
Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here this evening and introduce to you Chase Nelson. He's been recently hired at the Mount Pleasant Fire Department as a paid on-call firefighter. And he is a recent graduate of Central Michigan University, where he has a bachelor's degree in animation. And he joined our department in early November, and he was able to jump right into an active fire academy. So we got him in the program, getting started, and he's pretty excited about that, and so are we. And he's a welcome addition, and we're going to swear him in and give him an opportunity to say hi to you. Raise your right hand, repeat after me. I, Chase Nelson, do solemnly swear
I, Chase Nelson, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the laws of the state of Michigan,
the laws of the state of Michigan,
and the ordinances of the city of Mount Pleasant,
and the ordinances of the city of Mount Pleasant,
and I will faithfully discharge the duties of a paid on-call firefighter
and I will faithfully discharge the duties of an on-call firefighter
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Would you like to say something tonight?
All right, welcome, Chase.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to additions and deletions to the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions that the commission would like to make to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor to accept the agenda as presented, say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. At this time, we are going to move into the public input on agenda items. There are a lot of people here today because I know we have a couple of public hearings later on today. If there is something that you wish to speak on that is on the agenda today, you may come at this time. If you're wishing to speak during the public hearing, you probably want to wait until then. Is there anyone that wishes to speak at this time? If you'd like to come forward, stand to the podium. You'll be asked to state your name and address. If you are on Zoom, joining us by Zoom, you may use the raised hand feature or *9. If you're joining Zoom by phone, you'll be moved into the meeting and asked to state your name and address. Is there anyone on Zoom? Are there any emails at this time? Okay, is there anyone in the audience that wishes to come forward at this time? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the public input. You got a raised hand, okay?
Hello, my name is Frances Lickman. I live at 1212 Toma Drive, and I do want to speak on the zoning proposal at Broomfield and Crawford. I notice that this zoning proposal includes an additional 12.5 acres that is not referenced anywhere in the agreement to terminate the PRD, parcel 303. That parcel abuts the corner of Broomfield and Crawford Roads. To provide a visual, 12.5 acres is more than double the land area of Stadium Mall. Stadium Mall is 5 acres. If you rezone that parcel to C4, the history of rezoning requests indicates that it will almost certainly be developed with commercial use exclusively. It is doubtful that the current capacity of Broomfield and Crawford Roads is sufficient to accommodate a 12.5 acre commercial development. A traffic study from 2005, when there was less development than there is now, indicates that Broomfield Road would need to be widened to 5 lanes at the intersection, and northbound Crawford would need 3 approach lanes to safely and efficiently accommodate commercial development of that size. If you're interested, I'd be happy to provide you the traffic study. Development of this corner also impacts traffic at Broomfield and Mission, which already has one of the highest accident rates in the city. The 2020 master plan recommends a mix of uses for this property, some commercial and some residential. The only way you're likely to get that is to leave the 12.5 acres zoned as is. The current zoning, it's PRD, it allows apartments, townhouses, multiplexes, and homes. The kind of development that exists across the street from this parcel. But a developer has other options. He can propose conditional rezoning or another form of contract zoning. CD4 allows multiple uses, but on this 12.5 acres, it's likely to result in a development that will create traffic problems. Please wait for a developer to provide a concrete plan for this parcel, and then you'll have the opportunity to evaluate its merits. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Would you like to come forward and speak at this time? Okay.
My name is Timothy Caldwell. I live at 1340 Glen in Mount Pleasant. I'm a member of the Southwest Area Neighbors Association, also known as SWAN. Several weeks ago, I addressed the planning board with my concerns about the harmful effects to Mount Pleasant public schools if they rezone the property under discussion. When the period of public comments ended, I was a bit disappointed with the somewhat enthusiastic presentation by the city planners as they described the layouts of the proposed Central Christian Academy. I left with a sense that rezoning was a done deal. I hope I was wrong. Briefly, my argument against rezoning is simple. The proposed private school will take away students from the public schools. Why should this be a concern? Because the state of Michigan contributes money to schools on a per student basis. For example, in the 24-25 school year, Michigan provides $9,608 per student. According to the documents given to SWAN, the supporters of the nonprofit academy hope to eventually enroll 200 students. Of course, it will take several years to reach that enrollment, but to illustrate the loss to Mount Pleasant and our schools, imagine the academy had enrolled 200 students this year. $9,608 multiplied by 200 equals $1,921,600. Almost $2 million that would have been lost in state funding to our public schools in 1 year. Assuming the academy achieves their goal of 200 students and continues to that level, say for 10 years, the decrease in state funds to our public schools would be $20 million. Tonight, you, the members of the City Commission, will decide the financial fate of our public schools by your vote. Will you approve rezoning to serve the interests of a well-intentioned few or safeguard the education of the many? The decision is yours. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Beth Odekirk. I live at 1338 Toma Drive. I'm talking again about the parcel, the 12.5 acre parcel abutting the corner of Broomfield and Crawford. Kind of think it's sad that I'm up here again, kind of fighting for a neighborhood that some decisions need to be made, and it impacts one very specific neighborhood. But here we go. The 12.5 acre parcel immediately abutting the corner of Broomfield and Crawford Roads is not part of the PRD agreement. The parcel has nothing to do with whether a school will be built on Broomfield Road. The 12.5 acres should not be rezoned. Several times in the early 2000s, the current owner of the 12.5 acres tried to rezone the property exclusively for commercial use. You are now considering a CD4 zone for the property. A CD4 allows many uses, but the developer's past actions indicate that he wants a commercial center. Commercial development brings more traffic than any kind of development. A large commercial hub at the southwest corner of Broomfield and Crawford Roads will bring traffic, congestion, noise, bright lights, and the potential for crime. There's only one road that cuts across north-south, and that goes right through our neighborhood. And that will be directly across from that major construction and commercial development. The future land use map recommends residential and commercial uses for the 12.5 acres, but the future land use map was approved in 2020 before the effects of the pandemic were known. In Mount Pleasant, the loss of businesses since the pandemic has been stark. There are vacant buildings and vacant spaces in shopping centers all along Mission. A vacant shopping center on Bellows near campus, an empty building on Broomfield where 7-Eleven used to be, and vacant space in the shopping near the old 7-Eleven, to name a few. We can't fill them. Well, we know what we've been filling a lot of our vacant spaces with. That's a problem. It would be best to use the commercial spaces we have rather than to risk creating more vacancies. The city planner has said that the Mission Street commercial vacancy rate aligns with the US vacancy rate. That comparison is irrelevant. Instead, you should compare Mount Pleasant before and Mount Pleasant after the pandemic. The planner's pretext for recommending a commercial center at Broomfield and Crawford is consistency with the future land use map. But the planner also recommends a civic zone for a school, which is contrary to the civic future land use map. Do not rezone the 12.5-acre parcel until someone provides you with a plan that will help and not harm our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else that wishes to speak at this time? Come forward.
Hello, my name is Charlotte Ford. I live at 1211 Forest Lane. I am the daughter of CME professor Amy Ford, and I am currently a student at Mount Pleasant High School in 10th grade. I did not know that I would be coming to this meeting when I woke up this morning, but recent concerns have told me that I do need to speak up because I don't think that you really understand how bad public schools really need that $2 million of funding. And you would think, oh, every school needs that $2 million of funding. We do specifically, because with how our school is set up, I know so many teachers that have left in the past year. I know kids have been fighting. I know that the public school system is desperately in need of more funding for more teachers and more safeguards for the students. I believe that the construction of this school would take away population and would take away student attendance from the high school and all public schools in the county. And I believe that this school should not be built because it would take away funding that we desperately need. So that's what I think. Short and sweet.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else that wishes to speak at this time? All right, we got another one coming.
It's Ron Ives, 5346 East Deerfield Road. And I'm one of the pastors of one of the founding for the school, Central Christian Academy, that we're purposing to build. And I'd like to just bring remembrance that the Baptist Academy was here with 200 students, and Mount Pleasant High School continued to go on and continue to develop and grow. And so our heart is not to in any way be detrimental to the public school. I coach. Competition is not bad. It encourages advancement and growth. And so, again, our heart is to be a support to to Mount Pleasant, to be an encouragement to the community, education. And again, we have a desire to partner with this city to see it advance and go forward. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Martin Notstein, 1361 South Crawford. That's an inside the city address, while some people who speak are not in the city. A few people who need to build a school can try to build a school. I only object to how this school board chose to accomplish their proposal and where it plans to build. I imagine that the buyer and seller got together years ago to divvy up the southwest property. As far as I know, it was never advertised for sale. It didn't matter that the acreage was intended by a contract for home sites. They will trash it. It didn't matter that a city with few large areas to build and a badly needed group of home sites are for the future growth of this city, page 54 in your packet. They decided what they wanted most was important. They talked to our city planner, who along with the city's attorney, planned the exact language for special usage to tie up the commissions into what Ms. Podenko calls no wiggle room. I'm not too sure most special usage candidates get that city staff benefit. They hope you commissioners think that you can't do anything but what they want. Before any commission rezoning vote was taken, the Southwest neighborhood was told by a city commissioner that the school rezoning was a done deal. What? Before any vote was taken for rezoning, the Southwest neighborhood was told by city commissioner that the school rezoning was a done deal. The PRD becomes toast. Hardly any questions were asked by the planning and community commissions in the public meetings. They've all been coached ahead of time. There was no way to fight against it. When I am told by our voted representatives that they don't have a vote because decisions are important to the public, therefore that means I don't have a representative or a vote. That idea has been fueling my opinion statements in this commission for months. No vote. What kind of buyer could change a 20-year-old contract, use the property in an agreement not useful with the future land use ideas? Even Mrs. Podenko tells us in her presentation that the special use had to be specially written into the agreement purposely by the city attorney. Have you noticed when our city planner wants to dissolve the PRD, it was all factual. She needed hard line, pieces of land and rezoning for a master plan reasons. And after the contract was trashed, she changed tactics. Doesn't want to follow the master plan precisely. She flips to a squishy plan for the 31 acres. No home sites, and which follows what the new buyers want. Little building, big property. Little building, big property. I said it wrong. For a year, the city planner helped the seller and buyer of the 31 acres along with the city attorney, worked out a precise language, how the city commission should vote. She said this in her presentation. She tells everyone that you don't get your vote because she says there's no wiggle room. You can't vote what the majority of residents might want. You must vote what she wants. Sorry to say what she wants is not thinking of future home sites, which is the one thing the city needs, or for the future kids and the future families who would live in these future homes, or the future of this city, including monetarily. Instead, our city planner should be fighting for new buildable home sites, not pandering to a seller and a buyer who want important acreage. In early September, I sat and listened to old established downtown businesses with 150 agreeing petition signers. They got slapped down. The commissioners wouldn't even look. They didn't want to, these people in the downtown didn't want any living quarters on the first floor in downtown Mount Pleasant. They were slapped down because new rules allow it. New rules they didn't know about because in the past years, no living quarters was the rule. Now the rule changes. They don't like it, but they don't have any say. It's trashed. Not following the future master plan is just what this city seems to do anymore. I consider this an important vote. Our city is already 48% untaxed land, and now it will be permanently given half of this block. It's red down here in this picture. They're going to give it away, not usable ever for the city to use. No need for additional civic when CMU has already 50 or 30%. Whatever their percent is. It's a large amount. And yet our planner is out of the country. No one can talk with her person to person while considering this plan. This is her plan, and the residents couldn't even go down to her office. Might not be her fault, but she's still gone. Couldn't speak with her. She had already spent plenty of her time in person with seller and buyer, but residents were thrown away with the PRD. I would think our voted commissioners would feel an obligation to protecting city residents' rights for the present, future, and not trying as hard as possible to fit what a new buyer wants, purchased with already set zoning or will, and change that zoning for what the buyer wants for himself.
I'm sorry, your time is up.
Okay. 30 acres is still a big chunk of land. Middle school is built on 30 acres, bus barn, everything else. And just because the church has the ability to call up its followers to flood the room, doesn't mean invasion is right. I don't know how you can allow to be told what you have a choice in how to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak at this time?
My name is Jim Dealing. I live at 906 Glen Avenue. I'm concerned about the commercial development proposal. It seems to me that this city, many of us wring our hands about the limits of our downtown business area and how difficult it is to maintain that. And we have a vast number of commercial opportunities out on Mission. Certainly, many of them have become empty. There's more sites available than there are people, and here we are. Why are we encouraging another significant commercial development away from other existing zones? I do not understand what the argument is other than the immediate profit of the developers. This seems like, I agree with an earlier speaker, that we're going to generate a lot of traffic, a lot of safety concerns, and I don't understand what the benefit of a commercial development is separate from the ones that already exist, which seem to be entirely adequate. If somebody could explain that to me, I would be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak at this time?
Tim Manus, 110 Plum Tree Lane. I didn't realize what the agenda was, that we'd be speaking about this issue right off the bat.
You can wait until the public hearing as well. It's up to you.
Oh, okay. That's what I thought it was going to be. But since we're doing this, I live in the Orchard Glen division across from the proposed development. And some of the oldsters here will remember that was proposed as a apartment development years ago. And I spoke out against it, and I stand by that. But I am totally in favor of the current proposal. You've got a planning commission that's looked at it. You have a professional in Manuela and her team that have looked at it. And it just makes perfect sense to get some development in that area. That's not city property. Those people that own the property have some property rights too. And I'm just saying yes on rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Imagine coming home one
I
evening
need
to
you to
your...
state your name and address.
Sorry, my name is Nicole Grams,
Address?
4478 South Crawford Road, technically Union Township, but I will address that. Imagine coming home one evening to discover your house surrounded by water on all sides, from the backyard to the road and even over the road. Imagine learning that because of irresponsible planning by past developers and a lack of disclosure from a previous owner, you now own a home you are unable to live in due to mold growing as a direct result of these drainage issues. Imagine that despite the well-known and unaddressed drainage issues in your neighborhood, rezoning for high-density developments are moving forward. This is the issue I bring to you tonight. I am directly south and east of the properties under consideration for rezoning. I'm here tonight to draw your attention to 3 points. First, that there's an existing drainage infrastructure issue directly adjacent to the properties in question for rezoning and significantly affected by runoff from those properties. Second, this drainage issue is well known to multiple stakeholders and should be known by these land developers. And third, this drainage issue is not mentioned or addressed in the rezoning application document, answers to the rezoning review criteria. First, there's an existing drainage issue adjacent to and affected by the properties being considered for rezoning. According to my October conversation with Bob Willoughby, the Isabella County Drain Commissioner, the drains for this area's water district are at least 100 years old, installed at a time when they were meant to drain farmers' fields, not residential or commercial land. According to him, the drains have been maintained but not upgraded in that time. The addition in the 1990s of the Meadowlark Drive subdivision, just south of my home on South Crawford, added an additional burden to an already failing drainage infrastructure, resulting in repeated and ongoing flooding events for the residents on South Crawford and the Meadowlark Drive subdivision. I can personally attest that two of the properties being considered for rezoning, Edward Peters lot 305-00 and the CMU lot 304-00 are densely wooded swampland that drain into the Meadowlark Drive and South Crawford residential properties. I have photographs of the flooding of my home as well as the Meadowlark Drive subdivision that I'd be happy to share with the committee tonight. The flooding pictured in these photographs occurred after storms in which we received less than 2 inches of rain, which is not an uncommon occurrence. But it takes very little to overwhelm a drainage system that's already failing to keep up with existing groundwater. As I mentioned, the drainage issue is well known to many stakeholders, including the residents of South Crawford Road and Meadowlark Drive, Peter Gallinet, zoning administrator for Union Township, Rodney Nanny, economic and community development director for Union Township, Bob Willoughby, Isabella County Drain Commissioner, Tony Casali, Isabella County Road Commissioner Manager, Brock Mogg, Road Maintenance, and even the Isabella County Sheriff's Office. I personally discussed this issue with each of these parties in October of this year, and at that time I presented the County Drain Commissioner with a petition signed by 11 residents requesting that the drainage infrastructure issue be addressed. Yet despite the fact that this drainage issue is well known, there is no mention of the problem in the answers to the rezoning review criteria document submitted as part of this application for rezoning. It would seem logical for such an issue to be addressed under criteria 2, 4, and/or 5. Certainly, this issue must be addressed and remedied before moving forward with any project proposed for the lands under discussion for rezoning. To add additional burden to an already failing drainage infrastructure would cause further damage to the homes and property values of existing residences and businesses. I request that my concerns be entered into the public record regarding this rezoning request, and that the city carefully consider the ramifications of additional land development without a plan to remedy existing issues. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak, or do we want to wait till the public hearing? Okay, seeing no one else stand, I'm going to close the public input, and we'll move on to receipts of petitions and communications. Manager DeSenza.
Receipt of petitions and communications includes monthly report on police-related citizen complaints received and a letter to the City Commission from John Zhang.
All right. Commission, before we move into the consent items, are there any items you wish to move into the regular agenda? Okay, seeing none. Manager DeSenza.
Consent items this evening includes approval of the minutes from the regular meeting held November 25th, 2024, approval of lottery resolution for Sleepy Dog Books Foundation, approve amendment to the 2024 operating budget, consider committing American Rescue Plan Act funds to revenue replacement, consider motion to cancel City Commission meeting scheduled for December 16, 2024, consider resolution to authorize the Assistant Finance Director to approve the issuances of payrolls and warrants from December 10, 2024 through January 13, 2025. Consider setting the first meeting of 2025 for Monday, January 13, 2025, and approval of payrolls and warrants.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to accept the consent items as presented.
I move that we accept the consent items as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, no. Consent items are accepted. Now we move on to our public hearing.
So I know the city commission has discussed the bulk of this business at a previous meeting. However, I'm going to hand it over to our city planning and community development director, Manuela Povidico. She's going to provide an overview of the proposed rezoning. After the public hearing, the city commission is asked to consider approval of the proposed rezoning.
Thank you. Good evening, city commissioners. Let me see if the slides will pop in here. So the first public hearing is the map action. The proposal is to rezone 5 parcels located southwest of Crawford Broomfield from PRD, Planned Residential Development, to CD4 with and without the residential restriction designation, SDU, University Special District, in CD4, in the Civic Zone. All right, so the overall goal for the city-led proposed rezoning is to align the zoning map with the land use policy set forth by the city's master plan, which calls for the removal of PRDs and assignment of what we call hardline zoning districts in accordance with the future land use map, as well as to advance the RRC goals by streamlining the development approval process. Ultimately, we believe that this will help unlock future development in this area. But in the near term, there is a developer that would like to build a new private school, as you know, and an existing property owner who wants to build another 5 new multiple family apartment buildings as part of the West Point Village project. And then in the long run, the rezoning would be also more easily enabling future subdivisions of low-density residences, which could include affordable housing projects or market rate projects and commercial development. So this is a summary sheet of the proposed rezoning with the 5 parcels listed on the slide. While the city is the applicant, there are 4 property owner entities who own the sites and who have agreed with this rezoning proposal. The current use of the land is multiple family and agriculture, and the PRD designation already allows for a mixed use of residential and civic uses. The proposed zoning would allow for residential uses, civic uses, and commercial uses. The future land use map designation includes attached residential housing, mixed-use low, and residential. I will note as a reminder to all of you that this rezoning proposal is the next step to the previously approved Planned Residential Development Dissolution Agreement that was approved in September by the Planning and City Commissions. But you may recall that such dissolution agreement only becomes valid after this proposed rezoning takes effect. So it wouldn't move forward if tonight's rezoning doesn't go through. This is because the city attorney advised city staff that a rezoning could not be approved unless the previous PRD agreement and any subsequent amendments were terminated per the current zoning ordinance regulations. So that's why we had to tie the 2 documents together, and that's why we came with the dissolution first and then the rezoning next. So now, staff is bringing the proposed area-wide rezoning that you see here in the slide. The proposed rezoning would also include parcel 17303, the corner site, which was not included in the original PRD agreement from 2000, but has been mapped as PRD since its incorporation within the city limits, including within the current zoning map. Such parcel is currently stuck. It cannot be developed unless it is rezoned. And again, this is because the PRD zoning designation requires both a PRD zoning on the map as well as an agreement. Since the parcel was not in the agreement, currently they cannot move forward unless they enter into an agreement. So this is a view from Crawford Road of site 17300, where West Point Village is located. This is a view from Crawford and Broomfield's intersection looking southwest to site 17303, where commercial, residential, or mixed-use development would be allowed. This is a view from Broomfield looking east. The area with the taller grass here is the entrance to site 17304, currently owned by Central Michigan University. This is a view from Crawford, south of the site 17305, where residential uses would also be allowed. Please note that there is a current sidewalk gap there, so the sidewalk is ending at the parcel where West Point Village is located. And just want to point out that any future development in any of these sites would be required to build sidewalk facilities, which would eventually close the gaps Last, this is a view from Broomfield looking east to 17306 site, where the Central Christian Academy is looking to build a private K-12 school. So now I'll walk you through the answers to the criteria for rezonings. And just wanted to mention that historically, I went back to packages where rezonings were proposed previously, either by staff or whatnot. Previous staff did not include answers to the criteria when it was a city-led rezoning, but I decided to do so in order for you to have a greater picture of the proposal. And this is the future land use map that you can see in the master plan, and then the chart comparing the master plan and the proposed zoning, current zoning and proposed zoning. As previously mentioned, the proposed area-wide rezoning does deviate from the master plan land use map in two such situations. The first one is the designation of the CMU-owned parcel 17304 to Special District University. While staff's proposal includes mapping SDU to match the current ownership of the land, consistently with other CMU-owned properties in Mount Pleasant, staff is also proposing a text amendment, which will be subject to the next public hearing tonight, which would assign City 3 district regulations if the property is ever conveyed to another owner. That text change also aligns to other CMU on-sites regulations. So as an example, anything located at the university area either is zoned directly City 5 if it's ever conveyed, or Special District Research Center, depending on the location. The rezoning also deviates from the future land use map with parcel 17306, which is the subject parcel where the school development is being proposed. If this rezoning is approved, such school development will still be subject to future site plan review by the Planning Commission. And I'll also add the development parcel plan, which will be looking at specifically how vehicles and people would move through the site. So we look at throughfare standards and ensure that that is would be built according to the master plan or the zoning ordinance. While the rezoning would be enabling school development as opposed to single-family detached or duplexes, which is what you see in the master plan future land use map, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the current requirements for area-wide rezonings that exceed 80 acres, which must designate a portion of the area civic zone. The requirement includes needing to designate areas as civic spaces and civic buildings. And I stated in the report that there is a minimum percentage for civic zones. I want to clarify that the percentage is actually for civic spaces. So also we have a requirement for civic buildings that would need to be added. That could be in the form of what we call meeting halls or third places, areas where the community can meet on an occasional basis. And those would be required if it was a developer-led application. And I'm working with the school to make sure that they provide that opportunity for the city as a whole to meet and use some of those spaces, as well as some of the outdoor gathering spaces that they are proposing. So while city-led rezonings are technically exempted from those requirements, we're trying our best to still comply with those requirements. So overall, while consistency with the master plan is necessary, and that's the baseline for us to take a look at rezoning applications, either from developers or from city staff, there are conditions that may change that could lead us to deviations of such previously approved plans. And one thing that I wanted to mention that I don't think I've mentioned before to all of you is that the master plan did not designate any area in the future land use map as civic zone. And my understanding of that is because it was approved in 2020 during the pandemic, and we were seeing a decline of population. So I don't think a city planner could ever have assumed that there would be a market for a new school in Mount Pleasant. So I just wanted to point that because, again, we currently have civic zone designations where we already have schools, where we already have parks, where we already have parking, but I don't believe that people anticipated that you would need more of those areas moving forward. I guess city staff does believe that the whole idea of hardline zoning as opposed to PRD would more easily attract development. because it is a really more predictable and fast framework. And I do have an experience in trying to work with a developer in the past on affordable housing. And with PRDs, you have to come up with full engineer site plans, and then try to get it approved at Planning City Commission, and it can be unpredictable, right? With hardline zoning, you have the rules in the book, and you know exactly what you're getting into when you start a development proposal in a place. Because if it doesn't comply, the Planning Commission would not approve it. Overall, the outcome here that we're trying to reach is to bring more housing and educational options to the city to help attract more residents and retain residents, especially in the family formation years. So we currently have found that we have approximately 12,000 residents who already work in Mount Pleasant but not live here. So even though we have experienced a decline in population within our boundaries, we have jobs and we don't have housing for those people. And perhaps we don't have educational options, and I'll leave that up to you to decide. But I believe that, this proposal could help attract if we build the right housing in the right place. So latest demographic analysis, also provided by our consultants who are working with the Mission Street Plan, show that they have identified a new trend of incoming family formation long-term residents between 30 and 45 years old, which is very good news for us, and who need to be supported by housing and services geared towards the population. So while housing options such as apartments do exist in abundance to students, there are many missing middle typologies that are not geared towards families or young professionals or those looking for a starter home, which we see as a gap in the city and therefore an opportunity for this rezoning area. Last, there is an analysis from the American Survey data available for 2022, which is the closest that I could go back. It did show a gap between the number of children in Mount Pleasant and those enrolled in K-12 education, which the school would be potentially helping fill. Next, the ordinance requires that we look at compatibility of sites' physical conditions with the proposed uses. Planning has conducted general screening with the EPA environmental mapper and the RIDE mapper, which passed the air, water, and land contamination screening and environmental contamination, leaking underground storage tank sites, underground storage tank facilities, and so forth. The site is not also within the floodplain. And however, all of that said, to say that the Planning Department and the Planning Commission will continue to have the ability to request future applicants to supply additional documentation, such as an environmental impact statement, if they believe that there is some sort of environmental issue on any of those sites. In terms of compatibility with the proposed uses in the surrounding sites, the proposed rezoning will continue to allow residential and civic uses in most of the property. But since the private school project is being proposed in the near term, we did take a look of potential traffic impacts due to concerns that have been raised by the public early on. So a traffic discussion with the city engineer and the County Road Commission was based on preliminary projections from the school of 200 students and 23 new staff. That resulted in a preliminary assessment that the school development would not trigger a Broomfield Road widening. However, final determination would be made by the Road Commission at the time of a site plan review. And just as a parenthesis, we work with, for example, MDOT, and any pre-application meeting, if we have a potential development coming in, we have a city, an engineer representative from the state to come to the meetings and then tell us, what kind of improvements may need to be made, location of driveways and so forth. So we would be bringing a road commission member as well if we move forward with site plans. Crawford, north of Broomfield, is a city major street, which features many things to address safety. The city engineer did provide you with a letter that has more details about the north portion that is within the city's jurisdiction. And then again, I did mention that to the Planning Commission. Unfortunately, we do not have stacking requirements for a school development exactly. We have stacking requirements for drive-throughs, but it is in our best interest to have enough, right, within the site. So that has been something that I've been very blunt about in early on conversations with the school, that they would need to provide enough stacking to make sure we're not backing traffic up on Broomfield. So that would be subject of review by the Planning Commission when a site plan is proposed. And then the only new proposed use here is really the commercial activities that would be permitted at the corner site. Such commercial uses are mostly low-intensity uses because of the master plan, except for uses allowed pursuant to a special use permit. So our ordinance already tackles low-intensity versus high-intensity uses through the special use permit, which would always require a public hearing and a planning commission approval. So the Planning Commission, through that special land use process, will still continue to have discretion to require additional information, such as a traffic impact analysis at the time of a development application, also an environmental impact statement, or even an appraisal to indicate the effect of the proposed use to the financial value of surrounding properties. So all of those things are already in the toolbox for the Planning Commission for any type of development. And then in terms of utilities, all proposed developments will again be reviewed on a case-by-case basis as part of our regular review process, which include review of site plans by the Division of Public Works, who then check for infrastructure capacity. I don't know if you've ever seen in our packets to the Planning Commission, anytime we have a site plan review, it goes to every single department head within Public Works, and they will tell us exactly if the proposal specifically can be serviced by existing sewer, water infrastructure. We look at traffic, we look at all of those things from a Department of Public Works perspective. So that would continue to exist. Criteria for the rezoning also includes identifying the apparent demand for the proposed uses, which were answered previously when I talked about some of the data that we have, especially for residential uses in the school proposal. So now I'm just going to add that for commercial development, we took a look at the Mission Street vacancy rates and compared to the big US markets, as it was mentioned at the public comment. Overall, the finding is that Mission is a low vacancy rate. Therefore, the city could accommodate more commercial development. And then I would also say that location is key here. The zoning ordinance current framework is really trying to get more walkable neighborhoods. We have a tool that's called pedestrian sheds that are included in the packet. The overall idea is that we shouldn't be doing things in silo, so either just residential or just commercial. The idea is that we move forward with complete neighborhoods. So one that you can find everything that you need on a walkable distance. That's why the master plan flags the corner parcel for commercial development as well. This is the pedestrian shed that I mentioned. So I guess while the rezoning would include commercial uses to create what I mentioned, complete neighborhoods, Mission Street has also been allowing residential uses since 2018 when we approved the zoning ordinance. So the goal with Mission and other major corridors is for them to also become complete neighborhoods. So we're really talking about a trade-off here. It's about not having Mission just having commercial in the future, and it's not about having neighborhoods that are further from the center to only have residential. But the idea is to bring more residential to Mission and bring more commerce to outside of Mission Street. That's the goal of the master plan and the zoning ordinance. Next, the proposed zoning designations, they follow district boundaries, as you've seen. The zoning ordinance will be taking care of ensuring that development is context-driven. There are standards in our ordinance, and that's one of my main motives for proposing this rezoning, is to make sure that our very good ordinance takes shape. We have through FAIR standards, we have block size limitations. In this case, it would be 2,400 feet linear footage. So that means we're talking about like downtown kind of blocks. We're not talking about a huge mall development. It's not even allowed by the zoning ordinance. We also have requirements for sidewalks and street trees and lot occupation, building types, density, site circulation, building form and design. So that's all within the existing hardline zoning designation. This next criteria questions if a rezoning is more appropriate than a zoning text change. So there is a particular instance that we did look into one or the other. and weighted the two options. So we looked at potentially proposing a tax change to the CD3 Suburban Character District designation to also allow schools within CD3 zones. It's fairly common in other municipalities to have schools allowed in every single residential area. So we did look at that. The reason why we decided to go with a map change as opposed to a tax change is because that would have implications elsewhere in Mount Pleasant. So we thought it would be too much of a change. So for instance, if we allowed a school to be built in any CD3, then you could have a school popping in any neighborhood in town. So we decided to go with the route of the existing framework that we have, which always has a civic zone designation where there is a school. So that kind of answers this particular criteria. Last, the rezoning is for a large piece of property, therefore not constituting spot zoning, and the rezoning has not been applied for this area within the past year, so we meet that criteria. And then just a note that I've also attached more information in the packet about the school proposal and then implications to the city tax base in the packet. In summary, staff has clarified that the school tax exemption will only start after the school is built. So the parcel 17306 is currently used for agricultural purposes and can continue to be used as agricultural land. Furthermore, the rezoning will not impact the CMU-owned property, which is already tax exempt despite the rezoning application. And then overall, staff sees the rezoning of the 5 parcels positively contributing to the tax base overall. Staff is therefore recommending the action for the City Commission to rezone the 5 properties located southwest of Crawford and Broomfield from planned residential development to general urban character district with the residential dwelling use restriction, CD4 general urban character district, SDU special district university, CD4 general urban character district with the residential dwelling use restriction, and civic zone respectively. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much for your attention.
Yeah. Does the commission have any questions before we open the public hearing?
I have questions. I have several questions, but I'm going to start with one.
Can you move your microphone closer to you?
I noticed that in the form that you submitted for the rezoning, you've got 157 acres. But given that number, the CMU plot is not going to necessarily be affected because we are not going to do anything with it. What is it? I think for me, the primary concern has to do with parcel 1, which is, which has the 31 point something acres. It seems to me that parcel 4, West Point Village, has also been added to the 157. Is there a reason why that is added when it's already been classified?
Yeah, so the reason why I decided to keep all parcels together is because one, all those parcels are currently zoned PRD, and the master plan says that we want to get rid of PRDs and do hardline zoning. So that was the opportunity to do that. Okay. West Point Village, the whole parcel is not developed, so there is a back portion that's undeveloped right now. And with the rezoning, the developer would have the option to parcel out that back area and then sell it for subdivision or other type of residential development.
Okay, I have a follow-up question. So given what you've presented right now, do we have in Mount Pleasant any piece of property that is as large as 31 acres?
No.
So we don't have, if for instance, we, the city, wanted property that could be developed for housing or maybe in consideration of our tax base, we don't have any other property but this one?
Not at the moment. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So did the Planning Commission then, considering that much of the tax base right now in Mount Pleasant, I'm listening to people telling me about, taxes on their homes, that is quite high. How would the removal of 31 acres or the designation of 31 acres as civic space that does not bring in any tax affect taxes for residential properties in Mount Pleasant or even commercial? Have we considered that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Planning Commission overall believes that the rezoning is going to incentivize more development, which will overall increase the tax base of the 157 acres. Right now, most of the land has been just used for agriculture, so we collect really little taxes. Just as an idea, the 31 acres pays an overall taxes to all jurisdictions of around $3,500 a year. The idea here is by removing PRD and making development easier through mapping hardline zoning, even if we don't get all the 157 acres, we're going to have more than what we have today.
Is there a guarantee for that, or you're just speculating?
There is no guarantee for it. The idea is following RRC, so the Redevelopment Ready Communities goals. One of them, or the main one really, and the reason why we have our certification is because we're trying to be development ready. That means that anything that we can cut in terms of processes, approval steps, time, as well as unpredictability, will incentivize development. So this is not something that I'm saying, but it's a direct goal from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation through the RRC program. PRDs, they take roughly 6 months to get approved, and you have to have full engineer drawings to even go to the Planning Commission or City Commission for approval. That's a lot of unpredictability to add to a developer, especially if you're talking about a large site and the history that we have here with many of those site plans being denied. With hardline zoning, what you're saying is if you comply with the rules, you're going to get it approved. So that's why overall the Planning Commission felt like this will help incentivize development.
Okay. I am still not convinced, but I will let my colleagues ask questions. I would like to come back because I have some more questions.
Commissioner Bush.
So I came into this meeting primarily concerned about tax base, but I do now see some concerns here in regards to the traffic, and I feel like I understand that a little bit better now, actually. And I do just find it hard to believe that with just so many limited exits from that intersection, there isn't going to be a traffic increase. I mean, just the random picture you took was like 3 people going the same way, and I know that though, certain things, can be changed about roads to make that happen, but I do see the point about the traffic going up Watson, because that will happen. It's kind of a shortcut already, and so that concern kind of got brought to my attention. But then I am very uncomfortable, like, approving anything until we do have some more environmental information, because my husband serves on the road commission, and I'm like intimately involved with the water systems here in the city, and I understand what that resident is talking about. And until we have confidence in what the environmental situation is, I do not think I could vote anyway without that information, because I just think that's too crucial. Especially considering we just adopted our climate change preparedness plan. I just would be completely against, I think, the direction that, we went with the commission with that.
Yeah, one thing to mention though is that our drainage rules do not kick in unless there is a development. So any drainage issues would be resolved if there is a development. The city engineer is very good at drainage. It's her specialty, and what I've heard from her is that we have a really good set of requirements for drainage.
I did just want to follow up again on the traffic part, to go back real quick. what conversation, I mean, because this obviously affects Union Township too, and, traffic and development in that area, what do we hear from Union Township about this?
Yeah, I do have meetings with Union Township. One thing that we discuss is obviously the kind of regional schematics for the area. They have commercially zoned properties along Broomfield. So we do think that the proposal here would align on a more regional, if you zoom out. And then in terms of the more detailed discussion that we had is about sidewalk gaps. So that's why I mentioned that in my presentation. Both Union Township and the city have been requiring sidewalks. So in case the development takes place, the good outcome of it is, again, we get sidewalks. I don't think there's anything that we can do when we're just changing the zoning map, right? This is literally just what kind of rules we want to apply. Do we want to have planned residential development and go and ask developers to go through that process? And we don't know what kind of developments are going to be proposed, or do we want to follow the existing zoning ordinance and the rules that we have? So that's kind of the question. Anything that's more detailed, drainage, traffic, all of that is really, those are the sorts of things that we go through when we get a development.
Okay, I think I get it.
Commissioner Chapman.
I was doing a lot of research about this. And mostly the idea of, forget about what wants to be there for me. I mean, I don't, if they meet the criteria, they meet the criteria, right? But I was looking into, I love barbecue, and there's a, there's a place that I've talked about this. It's called Slow's Barbecue in Corktown. It's right on the corner of two terrible intersections that nobody would ever go to Detroit for. And people, it was in 2005, and people only wanted to go to Detroit to watch games. That's it. It was dangerous, and it was a terrible spot to be in. And so they decided to put it there. And last year, Ford spent $700 million. And Slows was the first company to open there. And so without Slows, the $700 million investment would have been made. And then after $700 million of that Ford put into the train station, 3 companies came in and they put developments in for housing because they needed housing. And that was $67.2 million. And so I think of the same thing with, Walmart used to be in the plaza where Dick's is. And then Walmart went in the middle of a cornfield. And now there's Kohl's, there's Sam's Club. Now there's a gas station for Sam's Club. There's Menards, there's Aldi's, there's that whole strip mall where all of those places are. And so the reality is things change, right? And I'm blown away by the due diligence that you have done. I mean, most of it, quite honestly, is way over my head, and I'm trying to understand better. But I think to look at things and say, yeah, things are going to change. I know again, I've been really looking into this because we've had a lot of concerns, but we've had a lot of people say, hey, it's so, in our community, aside from even that property, to say it is so terribly hard to put, I have money, I want to put it in development in our city, and our city has just said no. And so, for one reason or another. And so I know a guy that he was doing a $20 million property investment, and he tried to do it in the city of Mount Pleasant, didn't work, so now it's in Kalamazoo, right? And so that's what happens. And so I was looking into more about the history of this, and in 2007, when McGurk's wanted to put in, I mean, I literally took this picture and I counted, and it took me longer than I wanted, and there were 92 single-family houses that were going to go in that, and there were going to be duplexes, and there was going to be the business, for like dentists or at that parcel you're talking about. But there, I literally, this map was so small I couldn't even count how much housing there was going to be in that, and it got turned down. And so it's like, we can't have it both ways. We can't say we want housing, and then we come through with a beautiful drawing like this for housing, And then it just gets brushed off and said, and that's why they don't own this anymore. That's why CMU owns it, because they said, well, we can't put what the community needs in there. And so now I think I look back at SLOS and I say, okay, if we can get an anchor development in there, no matter what that is, if it's good for development to say, let's then get the 157 acres developed around it, I think that's good for our community. Like there may be, listen, I live on Pickard, and one of the biggest things that affects me that I knew was a good idea, but really negatively affected me, was a stoplight at Pickard and Bradley. People are parked in front of my house now. But I also have 10 cameras that face that intersection that I caught accident after accident after accident. And I would send them to Paul, to Director Laurie. I would say, hey, here's another accident, right? But now I have cars stopped in front of my house, and it is near impossible to back a 32-foot camper into my driveway. But I know it was for the good of the community, and so I was for that light. And so for me, it's like, if it makes sense, and I'm not here to choose what goes there, right? I'm not here to say, hey, is it okay for a school to go there? I don't know. But what I know is if they meet the criteria, then that's got to be enough for me.
I just have to say that is what we are doing here, though, because that is the point of zoning. So I mean, like,
I understand, but the specific thing, I'm talking about development in general. I'm not saying the specific development, I'm saying development in general. Our goal is to decide if we want that kind of development there, but not necessarily what the thing is, right?
No, yeah, not the specific thing.
Right.
Like, again, like, as we're talking about civic zoning, we could be talking about a 31-acre park,
Right.
for example.
Right.
It doesn't matter what the specific development is, as long as it meets the criteria.
Right.
But we're establishing the criteria that does govern that space. That is, in fact, what we are discussing here. So I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page about that. We are discussing the criteria governing this space. I thought we were having questions for Manuela. I don't have questions, but at the moment, but that was something that we are discussing that issue.
Yes, Vice Mayor.
Well, one thing that we haven't brought up yet is a letter that was in our packet, and it has a suggestion that having the school built, whether you agree with it or not, is not the issue, but that perhaps having it start small, K6, maybe 10 acres, and then still have the possibility for the rest of that 31 acres, well, maybe it would be a bigger school later. Maybe it could be more housing. That's the idea that was in this letter.
Commissioner Eke.
I think that if I'm reading the same letter correctly, it is, there's the suggestion that we keep a portion of the 31 acres as residential. The exception is 10 acres that can serve as civic. I'm open to that. I am just simply not open to just designating the 31 acres completely as civic, because we have been talking about homes. We don't have homes for middle income people. I can give you an example of new CMU faculty who is looking for a home to buy, can't buy a home in town because everything is expensive. In your report, you talk about, what is it you said about 12,000 people who work here but who don't live here. There is no guaranteeing that the construction or the establishment of a school, and I am not really worried about that is going to bring the 12,000 people into Mount Pleasant to live in Mount Pleasant. I appreciate the presentation, but that's not a guarantee. And for me, I do think we have a responsibility to the community to pay attention to what is happening to our tax base and to pay attention to how much taxes we ask homeowners to pay in the future. I'm worried about that. I don't want to wake up next year with a proposition somewhere that we now increase the taxes or have a millage to address something, So I understand, as my colleague Chapman has said, that yes, there have been resistance to, developing the place commercially. Okay, development, it depends on how you're defining it. Are we talking commercial development, residential development? There are all sorts of developments. I understand that, but I do think that it would be egregious, almost irresponsible for us to just simply hand over 31 acres and assume that, oh yeah, okay, civic in what way? Just a few opportunities to use some space in the school. Well, we already do that. Some people do that in the high school. I've used the high school. And yet we sit back here and talk about the fact that the city doesn't have homes for people who really need it. I am concerned. So for me, there are a combination of things happening. We need space. You have said that we don't have any other space where we could build. If, for instance, a developer comes in and says they would like to build residential homes, affordable homes for the low-income or middle-income people that we've been talking about, we don't have 31 acres elsewhere. We also are going to lose some money. I understand that. And there's no promise. There is no promise that even with the development as the Planning Commission is defining it or envisioning it, that, we are going to get whatever it is we think we might get. And then there are also the other issues that many people have presented. I live somewhere around there, and I know that particular section. It's busy. It can be busy. But set that aside. I want to focus on how fiscally problematic that is for me right now. And that's what I'm really trying to negotiate out of my head.
Commissioner Chapman?
I have a question. So with the PRD and rezoning, it's been problematic for developers to be able to develop single-family houses the way it is anyways, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that would change and help them to be able to do that.
Yeah, it will make it more
How so?
predictable. It will make it more predictable. So with PRDs, the overall idea with PRDs is, it sounds really good. It's supposed to give flexibility for any type of development to be proposed. So we regulate use, residential. It does include civic, and I mentioned that in the presentation. In the PRD areas, we allow schools as well. This is regulated by the previous zoning tax that's still in effect for PRDs. Anyhow, we regulate use and we give flexibility on anything else. So that's why it becomes a negotiation-heavy exercise. You need to bring a set of plans, like the one that you referred to, show to the Planning Commission, many months of back and forth. Can you tweak this? Can you tweak that? So forth. Imagine the amount of dollars you spend on engineering and attorneys, because everything has to also be codified in an agreement.
Well, I can tell you how much. That right there is $250,000.
So I think that's why the master plan decided to say, we have the zoning ordinance. It regulates everything that we need. Really, like compared to zoning that I'm used to, we regulate thoroughfares. So it's not any street that we're good with. It has to be a walkable neighborhood. So we regulate all of those things. It's already in the ordinance. Let's just apply that ordinance. So that's why the project makes sense to me as from a technical perspective. And that's why I think it would incentivize, because it gives predictability. Let's say a developer says, we cannot pay for the infrastructure. We can seek funding, right? We can try to seek funding to bridge gaps. There's so much gap financing out of the state. But without the guarantee that it's going to be approved, who wants to spend
Right, yeah.
several months and maybe years, right, speaking with us and with the commissions?
Thank you.
But if we offered a
Please speak
compromise,
into your microphone.
but if we offered a compromise where we say, okay, set the 10 acres or 15 acres aside as civic and the rest of it, we set aside so that we are not stuck or, contained, in terms of what we could use the land for. If in the future a developer shows up and says, I can put in a certain number of residences or homes for you and I need space, here is the space. Right now, we don't have that. So can we do that?
But you do understand, we don't own that property.
I understand,
Okay,
but
so
we
they've requested this.
Yes, I understand. We also provide the guideline, that which is what we're trying to do. And here is the guideline, here is the criteria, however you want to define it.
Yeah, I think we're talking about two different policies, right? We can either sit and wait, or we can make it as easy as possible. That's how I see it. The PRD, we say, hey, developers, you have a lot of flexibility. If you want to do something, talk with us. With the zoning designation, the hardline zoning, we're saying these are the rules. We are giving you all the information you need to see if you want or not develop in our community. What history tells me is that the PRD hasn't been working because many projects failed and we have this whole piece of land that's undeveloped. So either we can keep that status quo or we can try to create an environment that's more predictable and faster paced in terms of approval processes.
Commissioner Bush.
So if we did, as a commission, want to ask for a reconsideration of the size of a property, how would that change this process?
So we would, I think this is a good slide. So we would go back to the PRD dissolution. We would need to amend that dissolution agreement, speak with the current owners, see if they are okay with that change, and come back to the Planning Commission, City Commission for approval of the dissolution, and then come back to where we are today with a rezoning request. We cannot move forward if the owners are not on board. We could try to piecemeal. It would be probably very hard, but we could try to piecemeal and see if maybe one or two are wanting to move forward with the dissolution.
I don't think I understand that last part. So one or two of the property owners?
Yeah, because we were talking about multiple parcels.
Okay. I thought there was only two, so I was nervous there.
The idea here was the attorney advised that we kept, everything under the same dissolution agreement, so we are not doing spot zoning as well. So that's something we have to be careful about. But again, we can always go back to Stack Zero and try to negotiate with developers. I just want to really state here that there was no developer that came forward or owner that came forward for this. We had the school project. We had a pre-application meeting November 2023, and they asked, can this be allowed? I said, can I please apply for a zoning map change to try to align with the master plan? So it is a staff-led. So I had to convince the property owners that this was a good idea. And believe me, it's not very easy because, again, we're talking about zoning requirements that are pretty detailed. But just wanted to make sure that you all understand that.
I wanted to add one more thing to that if I can. So theoretically, if we do vote to approve to make these changes, so pretty much everything stays the way it is for right now until somebody comes in with a development proposal, and then the development proposal is reviewed for environmental impact, traffic, all that. Is that correct?
So if you don't approve or if you approve tonight?
If we do approve.
Oh, if you do approve, yes, that is correct.
Okay, so so obviously, if somebody says they want to build a, I don't know, something ridiculous.
Skyscraper.
Right, exactly. Well, yes, that's not allowed for sure, but yes, nothing more, yeah, so it would still be, it would be the same as if, you know, McGuire finally got to sell his corner of land too, right? It would be
Right.
the same process, it all goes through.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, let's say a Walmart is being proposed in this particular area. We're gonna require a traffic study, and they're likely gonna have to widen Broomfield, like they did on the other side. That's how it works. If it's a small grocery shop, like just a tiny one, doesn't include the 12 acres, we may not need to ask for a traffic study. It's a small footprint, it's a mom and pop shop. So that's kind of how it works. And the planning commission will have the discretion to require studies, further studies, and obviously the county road commission would have a say in improvements that are going to be needed.
Commissioner Chapman.
And just one more clarification, all right? I know you've just, all right, so we vote no on this thing, it just stays there, and no developers, I mean, in your opinion, as we're just gonna keep running the same pool, just don't wanna deal with the PRD to develop it, is that right?
Yeah, that's my
Okay.
understanding from the history and.
Because so I talked to two of them that today, just because I was curious, like what has been the history? And then one of them had told me that even there had been 6 now that have tried to develop housing there and just have been not approved. And so, I mean, that's my concern is like, if we just leave it there, then will it ever be developed? And so we make $3,500 a year. I mean, like, if we could get more tax base from the 157 acres, that just makes more sense to me to add taxable value to the land.
Yeah, if I may, I obviously wasn't here for this long history, but I did have a very specific interaction with a developer wanting to do affordable housing. It was a rent-to-own model, something that I believe everybody was very excited. And it failed for other reasons. There are state requirements that they could not meet. But one of the challenges that we were facing at the time was they have timelines to apply for the grant funding with the state. So if we had to go through the PRD approval process, so basically get the site plan fully designed, approved with the planning commission for an agreement, so we'll have to craft a whole PRD agreement, so a contract, right? We would not finish on time versus a hardline zone site that we did move forward with, close to downtown. We had the rules, so they complied with the rules. We had a couple of pre-application meetings to make it all compliant. And then we issued the approval, and that's what they need to take to the state to access grant funding. I just wanted to provide that as a personal experience that I had with this particular matter.
Commissioner Eckes.
So you're telling us that we cannot we cannot approve the zoning with exception. Is that what I'm hearing? I mean, and this exception would be, for instance, 10 acres, 12, the rest of it would be residential.
If that's what you want to do, then it will go back to the PRD dissolution negotiation.
So that's the only way we can get that done.
Yes, that's my understanding. This will be pretty much a Mike Homer question, but
That's the owners.
because he did tell me I couldn't even apply for the rezoning, get the rezoning approved without dissolving the PRD. And currently, the PRD that was approved to be dissolved had the condition that these particular properties with these particular boundaries would have been zoned as such. So that includes civic zone for 31 acres. Yeah.
Okay, the second, at least, this probably would be my final question. Stop laughing. All right, so the 12.5 acres, that particular parcel, I mean, the people who mentioned it, they're correct, it wasn't part of this. So now, is it possible to remove that particular parcel and keep it as it is?
So if that's another edit, right, that you would like to seek, I would again have to go back to those property owners and then ask Would you be okay with moving forward without the 12.5-acre site?
Yeah, because the initial presentation didn't include it, and I was going through the documents today and noticed that also, and I wondered why it's, so, and for me, that's sort of
I did include it.
representation.
I definitely included it.
Okay.
Yeah, from day one, very first work session dated back in November 2023. I've been including the corner parcel. It's not included in the PRD agreement from the 2000.
Yes, in the
And I've
PRD
always
agreement, sorry.
been very clear that the PRD dissolution was for all the other parcels but that one, because there's nothing to dissolve, because it was never included in the PRD agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, that parcel is zoned PRD, but does not have an agreement, so they cannot do anything right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why are we even considering it then?
Because in the master plan, it does flag that whole corner for mixed-use low, which is a mix of commercial and residential development. So because I had the opportunity to seek the full area rezoning, I decided to do everything at once to try to create a complete neighborhood. That was my goal.
Okay.
Are there any other questions from the commission?
No, we
Commissioner
have a
Bush.
conundrum, that's all.
Has there been any discussion with Parks and Recreation about if we are going to have more of a development in this area, any non-parochial public place in the area, like any park or resource or anything like that?
No, I'm not sure I understood the question, but I guess the answer is no.
Okay, so like, is there going to be a park, like a Mount Pleasant Parks Park?
If the civic zone area could be a park?
Well, if part of it could be a park, yeah. I mean, or has that been considered? Because if we are talking about creating a neighborhood type feel,
Yeah.
public space should be a consideration in that sort of area.
Yes, that was a consideration of mine. I did speak with the school board and asked them to separate a portion of the land to be a public park. I did speak with Philbus Corner, the parks director, to see if we had any precedents in the area that we had a public park within privately owned land. The issue that I could not resolve at this point is who would be responsible for liabilities and maintenance and all of that. Definitely the parks director does not want to take more land to maintain. We don't have, it wouldn't be fiscally responsible. I'm still talking with the school board if this gets approved. They mentioned that it would be an outdoor focused school development, so they would have a lot of space for agriculture, woodlands, and kind of open door activities. That space is accessible by the general public, but I can't promise you because of the liability and issues. Maintenance, yes, they are planning to have that for the students anyways. So, but definitely the parks director would not want to take any portion of the land for a park. We can't, unfortunately. We would love to, but we can't, yeah.
Are there any other questions from the commission?
I'll just swallow mine.
All right, I'm going to open up the public hearing at this time. If you would like to step forward, if you have not already said your piece, you may step forward. You'll be asked to state your name and address, and you'll be given 5 minutes. And I want to remind the public that I am going to be timing everyone, and I will tell you when your time is up. If you are joining Zoom by phone, or if you're joining us by Zoom, and you want to use the raised hand feature or *9 on your phone, if you're joining Zoom by phone, you'll be led into the meeting and you'll be asked to state your name and address and be given 5 minutes. Is there anyone that wishes to speak at this time? Come forward.
Timothy Caldwell, I live on 1340 Glen. Okay, I'm thinking from what I'm hearing from the commission that there might be some confusion about the rezoning and the ownership of the land. The city does not own the land. If the city says, yes, you may rezone it, or they do rezone it, it is the owners who will determine what happens to the land. The city will have no further say other than other zoning conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at this time?
I'm Giza Moffett, and I live at 1101 Watson Road. I have already spoken many times before the Planning Commission and also City Commission, but since you indicated that it was not a done deal yet, I want to share my concerns one more time. I'm here to speak against the proposed zoning plans. In the past, I selfishly focused mostly on the disastrous effects on our neighborhood, like the increased traffic and safety issues, the increased noise and lighting from commercial developments, etc. But I realize that the proposed plans are not just an issue for our neighborhood, but for the entire city, as every tax-paying resident will be affected by these changes, yeah. By the way, the taxpayers were never informed about this. So here are my thoughts. Mount Pleasant is landlocked, as you know. We cannot expand. The parcel under discussion is the last big one, besides the state home, that is not developed. Currently, we have 311 tax-exempt parcels, and 63 are church-related, and thus tax-exempt. And now you're being asked to add another one to these exempt parcels. A few years ago, the Morning Sun ran an article about local churches buying up properties in Mount Pleasant and turning them into tax-exempt places. For example, you know, the Grace Church bought the Embers and the Ward Theater. The former Coca-Cola plant is now owned by Central Michigan Youth for Christ. And in my neighborhood, my residential neighborhood, the residence at 911 Glen Street has been declared as a church facility by the Young Church. And there are many more examples. In addition to that, I'm concerned what happens when the reason for tax exemption is no longer there. It is not uncommon for churches or private schools to fail. Research at MSU found ample evidence for this. Here in our area, we saw the Baptist Academy and the Maury School fail. But once a church owns the land and uses it for another church-related activity, it is off the tax rolls. Taxes in Mount Pleasant are high. In fact, they are higher than Ann Arbor. When a friend of mine told me that, I really didn't believe it, so I called the assessor's office, and they confirmed it. So I checked. So I want to say, since they confirmed it, if the process, the proposed reasoning passes as written, it is likely that our taxes will be increased. At the current political climate, any new millage proposal will probably be voted down. Result is that we will get fewer services from the city, fewer infrastructure projects that modernize Mount Pleasant, and more people leaving. And that is the last thing that should happen to our beloved city. Why would the city commissioners consider giving away 30 acres tax-free when the city needs more tax money and housing, as you have heard? 30 acres can support 60 residences on half an acre each. And all of this would be paid taxes. One reason that they believe that building a Christian academy would provide a choice for parents and attract new people to come to Mount Pleasant. That is the only argument that the advocates have made up to now. I think this is a fallacy, as most people come to Mount Pleasant because they were offered a job here, not because there is another school option. CMU and the casino are the major employers, but neither will provide high enough salaries to live on the planned condos or apartments near the school, nor are able to buy a house in Mount Pleasant. They will build or rent one in the township instead, and the city loses out.
Your time is up.
Can I quickly?
Quickly.
Yeah, okay. I want to stress that building a private Christian school is not an ideological problem for me. It is simply a math problem. The city needs money to operate and cannot afford to give away any more land tax-free, especially not such a large section. So commissioners, I know that you are under a lot of pressures from the city officials, developers, the churches that applied for it, and others. But you were elected to serve every citizen in Mount Pleasant. I want to encourage you to explore other options for use of this land that benefits all, not just a small group. Thank you in advance for keeping your city, our city, financially viable and healthy.
Thank you.
I hope we're not fighting about who can speak. My name is Mary Center, and I live at 1209 Toma Drive. And I did speak with you previously, and I want to make it clear, I was reading a letter from the Swan Group. I am speaking as myself this evening. And a couple of the concerns I have already been mentioned. I will just repeat them. I am very concerned about the empty storefronts in Mount Pleasant, including just down the way a little bit on Broomfield where 7-Eleven was. It's not appropriate to compare the vacancy rate in Mount Pleasant to the vacancy rate in large markets in the United States. That's just a false comparison. We have too many empty storefronts that hurts the entire community. So I want to make that point. The second point you just heard about in some detail, and others have mentioned it as well. I'm very concerned about taking additional property off the tax rolls. It's just not very likely that people are going to vote for a tax increase, so the more likely thing is you as commissioners are going to find a need to cut services, and that, as you just heard, is going to negatively affect all of us. So one of the commissioners makes the argument we need development, and I don't think the issue really is development or not development, because you are being presented here with a specific development proposal. And the specific development proposal takes these 31 acres off of the tax rolls. And one of the arguments that you heard earlier was that this would help the Mount Pleasant Public Schools because competition creates improvement. There are efforts to create voucher schools, private schools, charter schools across the United States, and there is no evidence, and I do know the research literature, there is no evidence that this kind of competition helps public schools. What it does, and you heard the figures before, is it drains resources from the public schools. The estimate was about $2 million a year. You can multiply by 10 and so forth. So the issue is a particular development, and my concern, other than what I just mentioned, is the impact on public public schools. I've heard arguments, just people in town and I believe one or more commissioners saying that one of the advantages of using the land for a private school is that it would enhance diversity in Mount Pleasant. And I know that many of you, perhaps all of you, are very committed to diversity. But the thought experiment that I develop is this. Imagine a community where there are many different restaurants. There's an Italian restaurant, a German restaurant, a Greek restaurant, a Korean restaurant, Indian restaurant, Chinese restaurant. Isn't that wonderful diversity? And of course it could be, because people in the community could make a point of frequenting all of those diverse establishments and learning about the cultures and perhaps interacting with people from those parts of the world. So you'd have diversity, but it's creating unity. It's creating a strong community. On the other hand, you could imagine having that Italian restaurant, German restaurant, Greek restaurant, Korean restaurant. And what happens is that Italian people go to the Italian restaurant, and German people go to the German restaurant, and people of Korean background go to the Korean restaurant, and people from China go to the Chinese restaurant. So what you have there is not diversity. It's not unity coming from diversity. It's, I don't know what words you want to call it. It's balkanization, it's ghettoization, it's polarization. It's the community being torn apart, where people hang out, in this case eat, but think hang out with people who are just like them. And that's what you get when you have many private schools, many charter schools, many voucher schools, whatever you want to say, where parents can make a choice. I want my children to go there and only be with people who are like them. And it seems to me, I'm a sociologist, so I tend, to look at these big picture items. It seems to me that when you do that, you have, the center doesn't hold. You don't have a community. You don't have a public. You certainly are undermining public education. And public education, as I mentioned to the Planning Commission, it's the bedrock of economic development, economic growth, but perhaps more importantly, it's the bedrock of democracy. This sense that there are many people, in pluribus unum, many people, but we are one. And we come one through supporting public spaces, public institutions, public education. So I'm very, very concerned when we take land off of the tax rolls, but we decrease the community's commitment to the public. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Norma Bailey. I live at 222 East Andre, so I don't live in this neighborhood that has been discussed more profoundly. And both the last two speakers have really given a lot of the arguments that I would have made, and I sent each of you a letter this morning with my basic premise. Personally, I don't think there's a need for another school here, not because of an ideological difference, but because exactly what she just said, that it's just one more diversity or one more separation of our young people. But as I've been thinking about this today more, and of course it's the tax base that I'm worried about, to take 30 acres off the tax roll ultimately, although it yet would need to be developed by other developers, I took a look at the size of the acreage compared to, for example, Renaissance Public School. Renaissance Public School has 426 students at this point, and they reside on 8.6 acres. They don't need 30 acres for their school, and that includes parking lots and playgrounds, as well as the building, et cetera. By the same token, Sacred Heart occupies, and I don't know how many students, but occupies about 5 acres. So I guess I would question that if the goal of this developer is to have a school of 200, whether it starts small and builds to 200, or starts at 200, why is it necessary to have 30 acres, thus taking 30 acres off the tax rolls? Because I am as concerned about the fact that we are struggling as it is to have people vote for taxes, vote for millages, et cetera, that's going to make that even more a concern. So those are my couple of points that I considered a little bit more as I was looking at size, because I didn't have an idea of exactly what does 10 acres or 30 acres look like. But when I saw 8.6 for Renaissance, I said, whoa, that's a pretty big school. So those are my points. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm John Zhang, 623 Hopkins. I really was going to only say a couple of sentences, but I'm going to add a couple on because of some of the things that were said. What I originally intended to say was, we don't own the land, the city doesn't, but they zone it. So they have some influence over where it gets built. And I would encourage the commission to be fiscally responsible. There are millions and millions of dollars of future revenue at stake here, and you need to consider that. Now, some of the things that were said, and Commissioner Bush, you asked about public park. Will the school have, a park? Yes, they probably can, but you, the citizens, can't go there. It's not public. Commissioner Chapman, you talked about incentivizing development. In fact, so did our planning person, and it has been argued by city officials that making a deal would spur housing development and economic development. But if the city converts 31 acres to tax-exempt non-housing as planned, it will take away more land from housing and development than is available in the entirety of the undeveloped land and the remaining parcels combined. There was also brought up that we've tried to get it developed before, and it didn't work. It didn't work because the developer didn't let it work. Make no mistake, the developer has the final say. He can make agreements and he can make demands, but they work out things. Now, it isn't always easy and all things don't work out, but we got to remember 3 of those parcels back there are owned and controlled by the one entity. And so what gets developed is pretty much up to them, or what's not developed is pretty much up to them. In fact, even the PRD termination agreement that he signed, that you met on before and agreed to do, had special things put in by him, by that group, to say, if I develop further, I don't have to follow current rules and ordinances because this is going to be part of this new agreement. It's a bargaining thing. You agreed to that, and he's going to do less than the whole rest of the city has to. But that's part of that agreement that you go to. But keep in mind, as you mull these things out, it isn't as easy as saying all the things that our planner came up and said, oh, look at all these reasons. It boils down to zoning. What you want to have zoned. And if you're going to say, we don't want taxable land, this is bad for us, then that's what the commission stands for. But you need to be fiscally responsible. Millions and millions of dollars are at stake.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Tim Beebe. My address is 2257 East Broomfield Road, which is literally a stone's throw from this site. I'd like to address some of the things that have been said tonight. I'm an engineer, surveyor. I've been involved with this piece of property for nearly 25 years. I've been involved in the community for nearly 25 years. So, drainage. Let's talk about drainage really quickly. There's 2 drainage districts out there. There is the Upton Drain District, which runs through the city. It is overloaded, it's over capacity, and the lady that came up, that is the drainage district she's in. The parcel that you're looking at rezoning had the extension of the record drain put in 2006, specifically for what hoped to be development. No development has happened out there. It's been suggested that the PRD is one of the main reasons. Now, I'm here to tell you the PRD is the main reason. I personally have developed 3 different plans that have come in, And Mr. Zhang is incorrect once again. We did get one approved, and it was approved by the developers. It was approved by the city, and then it was taken to a vote of the citizens, and it was overturned, and they walked away. We're talking about the millions of dollars of tax dollars. Well, think about the development that would have gone in there in 2004, 5, 6, 7, and would have been already built. And where are those tax dollars? They're gone. Those developers that had that money went to other communities and invested that money elsewhere. There has been a lot of money spent developing plans. And the $250,000 that you stated, it's probably an understatement. I know what my bills were, and I don't bill like the attorneys do. So those are some things. I'm going to try and get back to the list. Just something for the public to understand. I'm a business owner. I understand the business taxes that I pay. Your industry and commercial pay for about 2/3 of your taxes. The residents pay for about 1/3. So if you want to be fiscally responsible, don't rezone this to residential. Rezone it to commercial. You want the biggest bang for your buck, that's what it is. Commercial activities pay much higher taxes. The apartment complexes, the businesses in this town, you get 2/3 of your taxes from. The residents are the only ones that get to vote on things. As a business owner, even though I have my business in the municipality, I can't vote unless I live there. It's a fallacy that people don't move because of schools. I heard that just a minute ago. Well, I'm the fallacy then. I have been driving to Mount Pleasant for 25 years. I kept my kids in the parochial school that I wanted them in Bay City. I didn't move here because I didn't have those options. So, although you heard it's a fallacy, then I guess I'm the fallacy. If parochial schools are such an issue and it's a loss of income to the public school system, perhaps we should just get rid of the one we already have too. And let's drag those kids and put them in public school. Why is it that this is such an issue? Sacred Heart has been around for decades and everything survived. In Bay City, we have 6 different parochial schools. I'm here to tell you that Bay City is not 6 times larger than Mount Pleasant. We are a small town, just like Mount Pleasant is. If we would have had perhaps another school, I don't happen to be Catholic. I didn't want my kids in that school. As far as zoning, 30 acres versus 10 acres versus 20 acres. Let's assume that you were buying a piece of property with your end goal needing 30 acres. But somebody said, well, you're only going to build a little bit right now. I'll wrap it up. You're only going to build a little bit right now, but trust us, in the future, if you need more, we'll rezone it for you. How much trust do you have? Are you going to start it and then not be able to continue it? You're going to put all that money in the ground and then find out that you can't continue. The school has developed plans that show how they would utilize the property, and they do utilize the entire property. Things like stacking those cars off the road. So I'll wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Renee Papelian. I live at 1408 North Drive in Mount Pleasant. I just want to follow up on some of the points that Tim made. The Central Christian Academy Board of Education has done extensive work regarding the layout of the proposed buildings and grounds, parking areas and roads, play fields, the athletic areas, as well as future additions and expansions necessary to accommodate the size for the site. Also included, and I know it's been mentioned, is an outdoor education component. The school is very, very much committed to having a large outdoor education component, which really enhances learning in so many ways. Just 4 quick things that the data shows about outdoor education: enhanced mental health, enhanced development, better curriculum learning, and more inclusive learning. The board has made investments in architectural design, building renderings, civic engineering drawings, and partnered with experts to help navigate the most effective use of the land. The 30 acres is needed to fulfill the vision to bring a high-quality educational option to Mount Pleasant and the surrounding communities. We continue to stress the importance of having educational choices in our city. The educational migration factor is a very real component of individuals either moving to a community or moving out of a community, or finding a city that allows the educational choice that best is suited for their children. I appreciate last month someone had mentioned that the school is not an either or, the school is simply an and, which is another educational choice for our community. I just want to make mention a couple of points on educational migration. Educational migration is becoming a very real issue with families. Whether it is a public, private, charter, alternate school, all of these schools, I believe, are important to a community because they allow families to choose the educational setting that best fits their children's needs. Children do have different learning styles, abilities, and interests, and some may thrive in a traditional public school, while others may excel in specialized programs found in either a charter school or a private school. Educational choices enable parents to select the environment that will best support their child's learning and personal growth. Different types of schools can reflect various educational philosophies, cultures, and values. Private schools, for instance, allow families to integrate faith into education, while other schools may focus on creative, the hands-on learning. The range of options ensures that parents can choose schools that align with their values. The alternate, private, charter schools often experiment with unique teaching methods, curricula, and structures, which can lead to new and educational approaches. With a range of schools that cater to diverse educational needs, communities become better prepared to support students of all backgrounds and circumstances. This diversity in education environment strengthens social bonds as people from different learning environments interact and bring unique perspectives to community life. Just in summary, want to encourage that communities with varied educational options become more attractive to families and businesses. In our findings, as we were, we have a website that we have different ones that have contacted us, but also in conversation, it became apparent to us that there were 35 to 40 families that were actually driving out of the city and specifically into Midland so that their child could enroll in a particular educational setting that best suited their values. We look at that and we want to provide for families that we don't want them, leaving our community for different educational options. We'd like to have all of the options right here. So in summary, I believe confirming the zoning change will enhance our community, provide educational options, drive innovation and improvement in education, help create a more responsive and effective educational system that serves the diverse needs of students and communities. So I appreciate the opportunity to share. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Adam Reed. I live at 6801 East Hovey Road. I am the lead pastor at Central Church here in Mount Pleasant. First of all, I want to say thank you. You guys have a terribly difficult but important job. Thanks to the Planning Commission. I want to thank Manuela. It's good to have you back in person, and every meeting that I've been to and the way that she presents, I'm just incredibly amazed at the job that she does and all of the work that Manuela, the Planning Commission, and then you as well have done and are continuing to do leading up to this. This is not something that just kind of has been thrown in our laps right now. There's been a lot of work put into this, but a couple of things. We've heard multiple times that another school option will take away from the public school. I would be the exception to that thought process. I have one child who has graduated from Mount Pleasant High School. I currently have two at Mount Pleasant High School. And so even though there are other options, the lady that spoke before me, Renee, she mentioned their families leaving Mount Pleasant, moving, and driving to Midland to take their kids. We've chose to keep our kids here in the Mount Pleasant public school system, even though there are other options. Lots of numbers thrown out. I want to focus just on one. And the one that I want to focus on, and the one adds up to many, right? You don't have the many without the one. And the one that I want to talk about tonight is a phone call that I got. I'm a pastor. I get all kinds of phone calls, crazy phone calls. The one I got a couple months ago was from a grandfather named Robert, who moved here with his daughter and grandchild from Saginaw. And they moved into this community. And they wanted to put roots down in this community. They enrolled their kindergartner, the kindergartner is Robert's grandson, and enrolled him in the public school system, and it wasn't working. He was floundering. And so the reason Robert called me was he called me asking if there were any other options for schooling, specifically faith-based schooling in Mount Pleasant, in this community, because they wanted to stay. And his struggle was finding a place where his kindergarten grandson could thrive. And it wasn't working in the public school system. And he was crying on the phone with me, asking if there was any other options. And I had to tell him no. At this point, as far as I know, Sacred Heart has a waiting list. There are waiting lists. And so his fear was that they were going to have to move out of this community that they have fallen in love with because his grandchild was floundering in the public school system. And so I would encourage us, I know you have pressure on all sides and your job is very hard, but I think options are good. One of the ladies before, she mentioned restaurants. It's good that we don't have just one restaurant in Mount Pleasant. Options are a good thing, because if I don't like a barbecue, I have other options that I can still enjoy in this community. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a raised hand on Zoom. Okay. We're going to take the Zoom person first.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Joseph Carrion. I live on 109 North Arnold Street. I really don't have a bias towards anything. I'm not against this decision. I'm not for it. But I do want to bring up an option that was brought up, which is to possibly maybe just do K to 6th grade. And just like people were talking about with the options that are open, I think Phil did a great job in bringing up that, like, that is a poor option. You either go no Christian school or go all out and do K to 12. I think that is the best options, because if a family goes and their kid goes to 6th grade, now they can't go to Christian school. I think that is going to pose a problem. This is coming from someone who is not religious, but I can understand the frustration of a family going through that, where only half of their kids' school is accounted for. That's all I really have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Larry Mitchell. I live at 622 North Fancher Street in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. In 1995, in beautiful Bay City, I asked my wife to marry me. She said yes. And then in 1996, I was promoted and transferred to the Mount Pleasant area. I've been here ever since 1996. When I moved to Mount Pleasant, I rented a house from a guy named Dean Adams at 1526 East Broomfield, which is right by the community church. Giant red barn in the yard. Beautiful, beautiful yard. And I would often tell my wife for 4 years, that's where they're gonna build the mall, right across the street from this house, right where we're rented. I'm gonna buy the property, it's gonna quadruple in price, we're gonna be millionaires. We only lived there 4 years, but it was 28 years ago. That land looks exactly like it does 28 years ago, exactly. And I have to ask, kind of sarcastically, what are you gonna do with this land? What is it gonna take to pull the trigger on any development of any kind? For 28 years, it's looked like that. I don't have time to, 28 years from now, I'm gonna be dead, and that property probably looked the same, just the exact same. Nothing's happened to it. Does the city stop right there? I mean, you can't go no further with nothing? So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I can speak again, because I spoke
Yeah, you can speak again.
Tim
Appreciate
Manus,
your
110
patience.
Plum Tree Lane. I'm in favor of the proposed development. You've got a great planning, commissioner there in Manuela. You've got a planning commission volunteer, all volunteers that have studied this issue. And as the last gentleman just spoke, the land is laid fallow for 28 years, I think he said. Let's make something happen there. So I'm in favor of the proposal.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Amy Loomis, 6858 North Littlefield Road, and I'm going to give a couple numbers. I'm a member of Mount Pleasant Homeschool Education Association, and just currently, just to share, and we have this year 54 homeschool families that are part of this organization. We have 100 kids that are part of our Thursday homeschool co-op. So these are all families who are homeschooling, 54 this year. Last year, that number was 48 families. The year before that, the number was 41. The year before that, the number was 38. So there's more and more, I think we're all aware of it, families who are homeschooling. I'm a homeschooling mom of 3. My youngest is a senior, so yay, I'm almost done with that. But I homeschooled just because it was the fit. I didn't have a plan on doing it. I probably made fun of homeschoolers before I started. There just weren't options, and it worked best for my family. But I absolutely would have enrolled my kids in a good Christian school if there would have been that opportunity. And so many of the families I know, that's what they're looking for, is just another option. And I do believe homeschooling's a good option. I think people, they want to do it. Anyone, you can do it and do it well. But I wish I would have been able to choose something different than that. So the idea of a Christian school, we're not trying to necessarily pull kids out of public schools, but give options to the kids that are not succeeding or going to public schools. So that was all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak at this public hearing before we go into the next public hearing? Yeah, somebody coming forward?
Yeah, my name is Ray Davies. I live on South Crawford Street, in that area between Preston and Center. And I'm concerned about the traffic. We've got about a dozen kids who live in that little section. And we've got a school down the way already. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to locate a school so close to Vowels, to kind of just jack up that area. And we already have a lot of cars racing down between the stop signs, throwing on the brakes. Had a few accidents right at that curve. Our neighbor, Roger Chase, has a boulder in his yard for good reason. And and I've been following these meetings both here tonight, but also with the county with the planning commission meetings. And it seems to me that one of the things I don't hear is why this site is so ideal for this particular school. I hear all the other arguments about diversity in education, options, but I just wonder about that. It seems to me you could have an outdoor education-focused school out where Odyssey is, or some place that would be more appropriate for it. And I'm just having a hard time visualizing the pedestrian shed as well, how we're going to make that into but maybe my vision is limited. But there are some things, the issues that have come up that I don't hear responses coming back to, such as the issue of all of the blight around campus, those buildings, the decaying malls or whatever it is, those unused properties. I've heard, anyway, so I guess that's my main point, is about putting another school in that location. I don't know about that, and I think that we would do well to take Francis Lichtman's words at the beginning of this meeting to heart and really kind of dive into that a little bit about the traffic increases that will be necessitated with commercial development at the corner there. So that's it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak at this time?
I know I already spoke. It's only going to take 30 seconds. Margin Notstein, 1361 South Crawford Street. I've looked into the nature schools quite a bit, and nature schools don't consider a treeless flat field as a good specimen for their schools. They usually need a few trees. They need a little bit of the different environments. And that one other thing is, my grandchildren go to a school in Midland called Floyd Elementary. It's one of those nature schools, and my daughter-in-law says that many of the teachers are not well trained in nature study kind of education. And so I'm sure this school is going to be careful, but they're going to have very experienced kind of people teaching this kind of a nature kind of a course, because teachers just don't automatically know how to work that into their subjects. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishes to speak at this time?
Hello there, Susan Murnau. I live at 1523B East Gaylord Street. And again, I also want to echo my thanks to you. I've been to several of these meetings, and I admire that you run for this position because it's a lot of work and it's a lot of very difficult decisions for our community. I just wanted to respond a little bit to the nature piece. I'm on the board for the school. And I do have a background in biology. I have a Master of Arts in teaching biology, and so I know that we're very intentional about the nature component that we'd have there. Currently, the property that we are looking at is a bean field, but that's because all that's been able to be done there right now is agriculture. And so we are going to, if this were to go through, we would be definitely looking to improve the land and have already been in conversations for that. All I want to say, thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak at this time?
I spoke on 13, can I speak on 14?
You can speak on 14 when we start that public hearing. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on number 13? Is there anyone on Zoom? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Wingard.
Yeah, so a lot of the contention for this piece of property, just these parcels here, stems from the fact that this is the last large chunk of undeveloped land in the community. When we first started bringing up the planned residential development agreements and dissolving that, the question I have was it a good idea to pursue this and civic zoning, rezoning when we have litigation ongoing about the Mount Pleasant Center property, which would also represent a significant chunk of developable land, depending on how that litigation turns out. I leave that to the rest of the city commission of just with developments of the Mount Pleasant Center property, that cuts out a significant, like if that litigation goes poorly, then then that cuts out a significant chunk of developable land within the community. And so that's where the focus on civic zoning comes into play for myself. We do not have control over whether it's a school or a park or anything else other than outside of we can zone this as civic or residential. And looking at civic, again, yes, this large chunk of property, which is some of the last undeveloped land within the area, it would come off the tax rolls. So as we're examining budgets going forward, future development, that's kind of that's the lens that I'm viewing this through. And so dissolve the PRD by all means. We're hearing from sources left and right from our own city master plan that PRD is not helpful. By all means, dissolve it. I voted to dissolve it. But it's the inclusion of the civic zone that is the issue for me, because of how that would affect future tax rolls. We talk a lot about like 20 years, 28 years. This property hasn't been developed since before the 1960s because the city of Mount Pleasant is growing. So is Union Township. The amount of land is going to, and where developments can occur, is going to occur further and further away from city center. At the same meeting in which we discussed the PRD, I discussed concerns about density. And it was brought up that the rules that we had put in place at that point, 4 years prior, in 4 years, nothing's really happened, so let's get rid of these rules here. So how much time really is enough to establish a trend or a pattern? Again, I'm for dissolving the PRD. The separation of it off of the tax rolls through civic zoning, that's my problem. That's my issue. Again, looking at space to develop. We've been around the city has been around for 139 years, 135 years since our incorporation dates. Looking out into the future, would a city commission 100 years from now say, hey, I'm glad that all that time ago, and all of these decisions created so much civic zoning, or would they prefer to say, hey, we're facing tough budget problems. I really wish we had more property that was on the tax roll. Unless we can expand into Union Township, I know Brian Milkey's address, the supervisor, if we want to go grab some pitchforks and everything, we could move into Union Township, but I don't see that happening. So that's where this comes down to me. the development in the space, regardless, it comes down to zoning and the tax, and again, what we can have on the tax road and future development. So again, the obstacle being the PRD, let's dissolve the PRD. But it's the inclusion of the CZ civic zoning, which is the significant issue for myself.
Commissioner Chapman?
And I don't disagree. I mean, taking things off the tax roll is going to affect our budget, but I think for me, I'm just a big picture thinker. I'm thinking that, so if we lose $3,500 off that parcel, how much more in the long term is that going to bring in for the rest of it around it? I mean, if the PRD is just keeping people for 50, 60, 70 years from doing anything there that's bringing in tax revenue to us. I mean, what's $3,500 when we have a $56 million budget we're going to talk about, right? I mean, the $3,500, if that can spur on development around it, for me, that's, I understand we're taking $3,500 and we can say, well, that $3,500 for that 31 acres could become, different parcels. I think somebody said 60 and we get tax revenue from that. But the reality is nothing's happening and nothing's going to happen if we can't make this developable. And if rezoning makes it developable, then sometimes there's pros and cons to everything. And I think for me, the pros far outweigh the cons as far as development is concerned. We're gonna make up that revenue, just like Tim said. Like, imagine if 28 years ago we would have developed that. We would have $50 million, right? And so it's like we can look at all that stuff and speculate everything, right? And that's what it is. And so I think to help bring some development, something's got to spur it on. And if this can spur it on, I just don't know how I can say no to it.
I would just say, again, just kind of talking about that, I look at what you brought to us today. I really wish that had been developed all that time ago.
It wasn't, though.
I really wish it had been. But I think we could move forward. We could work to dissolve the PRD without the inclusion of civic zoning, so that the entirety of that property could be residential. Right now, residential includes larger apartment style, condo style, is my understanding, West Point Village. And my understanding, like, from what I can tell, it's zoned to continue that same kind of development.
In single-family homes. Yes,
I mean,
B4 includes all that.
It includes all that, but what has already been developed there? So again, looking at like what has already been developed there, it's highly likely that just continues to be a similar style of housing. Now, again, we can all speculate. We can all speculate about what will and won't happen, but the only hand we have on it is zoning. So again, I would be pro dissolving the PRD. I just would want to see it as a residential style for the full section that we have been discussing.
Commissioner Ake?
I am agreeing with Commissioner Wingard.
Can you please speak into your microphone?
All right. Hello, microphone. I am agreeing with Commissioner Wingard. I am just simply not comfortable taking that portion of land off the table as possible and future task, revenue. We just simply have a very low tax base. I understand that 2/3 of the taxes paid in this community may be paid by businesses and 1/3 by, the residents. Still, we've got, as people, several people have pointed out here, we have a lot of empty businesses here. Are they paying taxes? I don't know. They are probably. We do have a serious need for homes, residences. And if this space can accommodate the kind of residences that we have been talking about since I joined this commission, for the past 3 years, we have talked about that. We've identified that. The state of Michigan has identified that. It's a national problem. And so here we are looking at the space that we have that we could use to develop residential, spaces for people. And we're about to just simply go say, hey, let it be civic. I just simply think that it's not wise for me. It's counter everything else that I've run on. There are other issues, but I want to focus on that, at least the issue of not having those taxes that would come from that. And I just want to add that there's no gainsaying of what would happen, to the boarding school space. We don't know. Plus, it also has a very restrictive language.
Anybody else have any other comments? All right, at this time, I will ask for a motion.
I move that we approve that we adopt the planning commission's proposed zoning map amendment Z24-01 for the 5 properties located southwest of Crawford and Broomfield.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Chapman, a second by Rollins.
Grace.
Yep. We will do a roll call vote.
Commissioner Winger,
No.
Commissioner Chapman,
Yes.
Commissioner Bush,
No.
Commissioner Eke,
No.
Commissioner Rollins,
No.
Vice Mayor Alsager,
Yes.
Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
motion denied, 3-4.
Okay, because this motion denied, do we need to move on to the next public hearing?
Yeah, we do still have to hold the next public hearing.
We don't have to have the second public hearing.
We do have to hold the
We
second
do?
public
Okay.
hearing.
Sorry, these guys were talking to me in my ear. All right, so we're moving on to the second public hearing.
I like the John thing.
I guess I'll just state that because the first motion was denied, we don't have an SDU designation in that parcel. So I'm not sure if there is a point to vote on this one. But I think city manager just said that we have to hold the public hearing portion of it.
Yeah, and the SDU is for the property owned by CMU.
Yes, yeah. So this text amendment would accompany the rezoning to ensure that if the land is ever conveyed from Central Michigan University to a third party, that the CD3 zoning regulations would automatically apply. But I don't have anything to amend at this point.
Okay. And because the first motion was denied, the PRD is not dissolved.
Not dissolved, yeah. The whole 157 acres is still zone PRD.
Can we request that city staff helps build a proposed resolution and public hearing to dissolve the PRD?
But to do that, you have to rezone.
So there's one rule that we need to pay attention to. We are not going to be able to apply for rezoning the next year. So I can't come back within the next year. And I would love to get some direction on what to try to bring back to current property owners. If that's the intention, to still dissolve the PRD and zone something else.
Do we want to have discussion about that and as part of the public hearing, as part of the comment on this agenda item?
Right now, we're doing this public hearing.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
But we're just clarifying some information. The PRD is not dissolved. Everything goes back to the original. The only thing we have left is the SDU to change that in the table, right? Yeah.
Yes. But again, if you approve the text change, I'm not going to be able to actually do it.
Okay.
Can we
So-
vote to
Why
table?
move that we don't approve the text change?
There we go.
Seconded.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We'll have a roll call. Lingard,
Okay, so what are we?
Not to.
not to change anything.
Not to change
Okay.
anything.
There's people waiting to speak. John wanted
Oh.
to speak on this one.
Well, the thing is, John, we're not actually going to make any changes. Do you still want to speak on it? Yeah, okay. We will hold the motion at this time.
Two things, the minor part first, that the reminder that the CMU property is already zoned as a school. It's CMU property. There's 54 acres, the biggest chunk of property in there that's not taxable, and the city doesn't by zoning control what gets built or not built. That's just as a general reminder. The second thing is, Commissioner Weingart, that was important because the things that so many people have said have held up development and have goofed everything up in the past and stopped this development was because of this language, because the PRD was stopping it. Well, we can get rid of the PRD, we can have the zoning, we can have the school, and we can restrict the amount that goes so that you maintain taxable property. And with this PRD gone, there will be development, at least the planning commissioner claims that in her many arguments. So I think that was a wise move to allow all those things to happen, the school, the taxable land, and future development. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak right now? Is there anyone on Zoom? No? All right, we will go back to the motion. We have a motion by Chapman okay, and a second. All right, roll call.
Commissioner Bush?
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins?
Yes.
Commissioner Eke?
Yes.
Commissioner Chapman?
Yes.
Commissioner Wingard?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Alsager?
Yes.
Mayor Perschbacher?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, we are moving on to new business. Manager DeSense, do you want to cue this up?
Absolutely. So first up is consider resolution approving the final 2025 operating budget and set the millage rate for 2025. City Commission is asked to approve the proposed 2025 budget following presentation at 2 work sessions and following the annual public hearing. The proposed budget will spend $54 million. The budget maintains the current 16.25 millage rate from last year. The general fund will use $190,000 of total fund balance, leaving the city with an estimated remaining unassigned fund balance of $6 million at the end of 2025.
Okay, are there any questions?
No questions. Just wanted to make a couple of points here. Just asking for a little leeway.
Okay.
Let's see. I just wanted to thank all the city staff for their hard work on the budget. They're not only in preparing, but just the stewardship of city resources. Let's see. I'd like to highlight the efforts of staff involved with the PEAK program for working to maintain its solvency. That was a big issue that we discussed in 2023, and I was glad to see the work that was done to extend that out through 2028. Childcare is good for the economy, and it's a benefit to not just Mount Pleasant, but to the entire area as it's open to the kids well without. Let's see. I wanted to, on that note, Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe gave over $1 million in grants this year, so I wanted to thank them for that partnership, including $115,000 to the PEAK program. That was, well, that's separate, I believe. That was awarded this November. Let's see, the big thing from the general fund, talking about the general fund that I'd like to highlight, I'd just like to read some of manager dissents statements in the transmittal letter that goes to us to kind of just emphasize like what we've been focusing on as we've been working on the budget. Since 2018, the city's general fund revenue had increased on average 1% per year, while expenses increased on an average of 2% per year. Projections in 2023 showed that if the trend continued without intervention, the city would have a structural deficit each year after 2026. Staff has successfully addressed this issue as discussed above. Current projections show this structural deficit in 2028 with enough cash on hand to address the deficit until 2031 while maintaining the minimum requirement for the city's fund balance. So basically, we've we're addressing the issue that has been, we have identified an issue in our budget and we are actively addressing it. And again, I'd like to thank staff for the hard work that goes into pushing something like that off and to continue to seek new sources of funding. Let's see. The last thing I'd really like to say is just, and this is something I commented on briefly last year, and I'd like to just kind of come back as a bit of attention as I've reviewed the budget, just passing on to staff and as we look to the future. Let's see, we have seen significant savings from the reevaluation and consolidation of roles amongst staff as vacancies have arisen. I do always appreciate the willingness of staff to step up and the creation of more efficient processes, but there are always limits to what any team or individual can take on. A thinner staff does mean changes and departures have a greater impact. And I always want to stress that we need to be careful and intentional when deciding not to fill a role. So that is a big concern of mine, and that's something that we've discussed and it's been addressed as we've gone through the process of approving this budget. But just again, going into the future, that is a concern that I continue to have, and not necessarily something we're doing wrong, but just something I want to be vigilant about. Let's see. And again, I just want to give my thanks to the staff, Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe for their donation, for their grant funding. And just noting that we have the same 16.25 mils currently. But that covers a lot of what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Questions? Okay, is there a motion?
I move to approve the budget for the proposed 2025 operating budget as presented, and at this time maintain the millage rate at 16.25 mils.
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Our next one is to consider resolution supporting amended rates, fees, and charges. Manager dissents.
The City Commission is asked to approve the associated fees and charges that support the proposed 2025 operating budget. This includes a 7% increase for water service fees, as well as various fees related to public works services. The full list of fees is in your City Commission packet.
Now, one thing that we had talked about in the agenda meeting was that even though there's a 7% increase in water and sewer, everyone, because of the moving to Granger pickup, that recycling fee is taken off. So even though it's an increase, it's not really a big increase considering what was it, 2 something will we pay?
For the recycling, do you happen to know?
I think it's 250.
Okay. I was going to say, I don't look at my bill that closely, unfortunately. My apologies. But yeah, the offset for the average homeowner for the increase in water fees, we anticipated to be $1.21 per month.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any questions, concerns on the resolution? I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the rates and fees as presented.
I'll second it.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, we're going to consider the contract with UME Gerber Life. Manager dissents.
So the city uses stop-loss insurance as a way to hedge against the risk of extraordinarily high claims related to the employer-provided health insurance plan that we operate. I did make a mistake in my note to the city commission. The city actually received 9 proposals, not 5, 9 proposals from 5 different carriers for stop-loss insurance. City staff had reviewed them and had even gone back to the current incumbent provider, but after reviewing everything, staff is recommending the contract to be awarded to UME Gerber Life. This proposed contract is a 7% increase above last year's cost. The total annual cost is estimated to be $228,787 for stop-loss insurance for 2025.
Are there any questions? I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we vote to extend the contract with, sorry, is it UM Gerber Life?
UME
UME Gerber. Mhm.
Seconded.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Now we're moving on to the discussion of city manager evaluation process. Manager DeSenza.
I know it sent the city commission an email on this, really trying to encapsulate my thoughts, but just after our last meeting, a couple of concerns came forward from staff based on the previous method of utilizing a 360 for the city manager. Really what I'm asking for the city commission to consider, and I certainly hear some of the concerns that were made at the last meeting, but I'm asking the city commission to consider working with a consultant on something like this. It would provide more structure and organized feedback while still maintaining the city commission's ability to really look at the things that it wanted to consider. But again, also very much what I was concerned about is the possibility that negative comments could come forward in a public way for individuals that really have nothing to do with such a process. And that's not something that I think that I certainly didn't think about when we were talking about this 2 weeks ago. And I don't know that that's something that the city commission was entirely looking to have as part of the process either.
Commissioner Chapman.
I think, and I saw an email from Commissioner Ecke, that what we were talking about, and my motion had nothing to do with the city manager review. I mean, I went and looked, it had nothing to do with city manager review. It was the climate of workplace. And so I went and did a lot of research on this too. I spent a lot of time with, and so I'll tell you, Forbes Human Resources Council had a lot of information. And one of the things that was important to me is that as I was reading through all of these things, is that employees feel like the city commission listens to them. And the only way to do that is to hear them. And so, especially about the climate of workplace. And so for me, I'm also not, I'm a simple guy. And so to spend taxpayers' money to hire a consultant when we can ask questions. So I thought, well, what are some questions? Glad you asked. Because again, I'm a very simple guy. And so here's what I came up with through a lot of research about what other people have done. And this is the exact questionnaire that we provide our staff that work for the organization I own. On a scale 1 to 5, how would you rate the overall work environment? Scale 1, poor, to 5, excellent. Question 2, do you feel supported by your coworkers? Explain. And then leadership and communication. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate how effective leadership is at communicating goals and expectations? Scale 1, poor, to 5, excellent. Question 4, what could leadership do to improve communication? Question 5, under professional development, do you feel the organization provides sufficient opportunities for growth? Question 6, what additional training or development opportunities would you like to see? Recognition and rewards. Number 7, do you feel valued for your contributions at work? From a scale of 1, never, to 5, always. Question 8, what type of recognition are most meaningful to you? Work-life balance. Question 9, do you feel the organization supports a work-life balance? Question 10, what changes could improve work-life balance? And the overall satisfaction on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this organization as a great place to work? Scale 1, not likely, to 10, very likely. Question 12, what is the one thing you think the organization does well? And what is one area where the organization could improve? And then 13, do you have an additional comments to share? I think for me, those are the things that are important to me. And so to hire a consultant to spend taxpayers' money when it can be as simple as that, and all the stuff I've read, I mean, even through Forbes, through Google does an annual anonymous survey to every single employee every year. And so, I went through and I did all the pros and cons just like I do for everything. And all the cons that you wrote were all the same articles that said all the pros, right? And so it had pros and cons lists, and the pros for me far outweigh the cons to say, well, people are gonna say mean things. Well, but people are gonna feel like especially in a society where we're really valuing transparency, where we're saying we're here because we're elected to serve you, just the same as we're elected to make sure that the work environment is a place people want to come. And so to make it overcomplicated and prolong people just sharing, I mean, I just don't think we need to spend a bunch of money to hire a consultant to do it when all these other organizations that I've read, I mean, they make it simple.
Commissioner Bush.
So I would hope that city staff would always know that they would have a voice with commissioners, just like anybody else connected to the city. I am skeptical, even though I see the value of a simple approach like the one you proposed. I am concerned that the issue, I'm not saying it is, but that it may be more complicated than that and would be beneficial to consult with a consultant. Or might I suggest, and I know this adds a little stumbling block perhaps to getting this started, is I am sure that there are any number of students at CMU who this type of project, statisticians, sociologists, psychologists, political science, business, school of business, I would imagine there are several CMU students who would see this as like a capstone style project, maybe to develop a system, or more than likely to be, maybe they want to go into this type of career analysis. I think we could reach out to some people at CMU and maybe be able to accomplish both by not spending taxpayer money, providing a cooperation opportunity, and then probably getting top of the line results, fresh off the trends.
Commissioner Eke.
Okay, yes, I did. I responded and said, my focus, and I hope that was clear 2 weeks ago, that the focus is not on the manager, it is on the environment. I am troubled by people stopping me and asking me what's going on in City Hall. I have no idea what's going on. And that's what I have to say. I don't know, all right? We're losing staff. I don't know how many staff we've lost. I am not as connected to people outside CMU as, Commissioner Chapman or Bush or Hirschbecker or Alsager. I am connected to people, but a lot of them are people at CMU, and then they have other connections through which I connect to the community. But the kind of networking or conversations that happen, outside, where I work, is one that I sometimes encounter when, my people in my community or my, residential area stop me and say, hey, what's going on? This is going, so there is conversation. I don't know what the nature of or the impetus for all of that conversation is. And so 2 weeks ago, when I said that this is important. It's because we need to look at workplace environment or climate, however you frame it, which was my response. It's not about the city manager, although that whole workplace environment or that space would also involve everybody, who is in that particular space or who works in that particular space. I also did say that 2 weeks ago, we wanted to protect the city manager, not as an individual, but in terms of the city manager's integrity and the integrity of the process. I said specifically that I wouldn't encourage HR to do this. And the city manager should not undertake doing this because of concerns that the kind of results that we want would not be what we received, which is what the city manager was articulating in terms of negative. So you want distance. I did propose that, it might be of interest to us to identify somebody who has no vested interest in the evaluation or, city administration to do this, because that provides us with the transparency that we want, and the person would also be able, hopefully, to give us both, the qualitative data that we need and the quantitative, data, the narrative also, and analyze the material to say to us, this is what we're seeing, or this is what they are seeing from the perspective of somebody who stands outside the whole piece, okay? That's why I'm not necessarily interested in engaging in the process itself. I don't want to be the person doing it because I know some of you. And so that's not even, the issue of transparency also would be undermined. If I were to undertake this, I know, quite a few of the city, staff, right? So I do think that it is important. Here is my analogy. Somebody says, your house is on fire. Do you want to know why your house is on fire or what's causing the fire or where the fire is? I want to know why my house is on fire and what's causing, all right, I didn't say.
That was good. That was good.
That, it's that's, what's causing the fire, the smoke. I have no idea. I need to investigate, all right? I would probably call the fire department to come say, take a look. Where did it start? What's starting it? What's going on here? So that this won't happen again. So that's where I am going with this. I appreciate Commissioner Chapman's, delineation of those questions that we could ask. Of course, we could do that, and then we'll do it ourselves. But wait a minute, we might end up encountering the problem that, city manager is concerned about, or Mayor Perschbacher talked about, that they encountered last time. I don't want to do it myself. And in terms of worrying about taxpayer money, well, we've got some money there that we haven't designated or that we need to expend from, the other, the ARPA funds or other funds. How much is it really going to cost us to do this? $10,000? I don't think so. I don't think this is also a project that I would encourage a CMU student to undertake because of the complexity of, the issue. So let's, I do think that it is important, and it's the end of the year anyway. Organizations do evaluate themselves from time to time, especially if there is the sense that something, things are not as smooth as they ought to be. If, organizations would take a look and say, all right, we sense certain things or there are gaps, let's figure out what's going on. Bring in somebody from the outside to take a look at it. I want to do that. It is in the interest of this body to do that, just so that we know what we have and where the gaps are, so that we can address the gaps and then move forward. And that's where I am with this. I want to have somebody else take a look at this.
Any other questions, concerns, comments? Vice Mayor?
I think whatever process we agree on, we should discuss it in a closed session.
I agree. I agree.
Is that appropriate?
The results, you mean, or the?
No.
Oh.
To discuss it in a closed session.
No, what Commissioner Al
Yeah.
Sager was talking about. Are you talking about the selection of the process, discuss that in a closed session, or are you talking about the results of whatever process?
The results of what would be processed.
Yeah, okay.
Definitely.
I don't think that
think you
is
can, yeah.
possible. That's not possible in a closed session.
Oh,
Very specific things.
Yep. There's only certain things that you can put in a closed session.
And I think thus why what I was trying to encourage the city commission in working with a consultant is that they would have methodology for gathering all of this information, but delivering it in a very sterile method, if you will. So in that way, folks aren't identified or those kind of things.
I agree with you, and that's exactly what I'm saying. Work with a consultant so that we are not implicated in the process. I want to stay, out of the process in terms of, implementing it. Let somebody else do it for us, give us the information. We will share it with the city manager. We'll also share it with, city staff eventually. But I don't think that we should be the ones to direct it. They can have a conversation with us and say, ask us what we're looking for, and then we'll just, have a conversation and let them go ahead and do what they need to do.
Okay, so is there an understanding of possibly hiring a consultant?
Just a
Yes.
last comment I wanted to make, just kind of as we're going through this process. I think part of the, because there's been a little bit of back and forth on, are we talking about the culture, like evaluating the climate and culture of the workplace, or are we evaluating the city manager with like this proposed action?
Culture and
No, yep. And I think part of the confusion of that comes from is how do we approach it? Because we as the commission, per our charter, just kind of drawing it back to like what our charter states we can and can't do, we operate through the city manager. So that's where it's, as we're handling all of this, that's a bit of my concern, is just making sure we're abiding by the charter and like what our powers are. Just because again, that we could run afoul of other problems out there. So however we conduct this and everything is just, again, so if we're talking about the climate, well, why don't we just go ask the city manager for it? Well, because if there's any aspect of evaluation, or if we're trying to cut him out for protection, for any kind of secrecy or anything, that still comes back to the charter of is how we act when addressing staff, when addressing the body of government. So that's, I think, where a lot of the confusion and tension comes from, is that there is that element of play in there of like, what are we allotted to do by our charter? So I think we're on the right path. I think we're finding a good way forward, but that's just, I think, where some of that conversational tension comes into play of like what our concern is there.
Commissioner Ake?
I'm glad that you said, we're on the right path. I do not want to have any conversations related to the evaluation with city staff. I don't. Okay, I want to make that clear. So, I don't think, and I'm not encouraging it's up to you, but I'm not encouraging any one of us to do that, because then that murkies up things. Okay, so however, we've had work sessions where we've had an external person who's delivered material, information, workshop to us. This is how I envision this. A consultant will handle this and provide us with the result. We will share, with the city manager. The city manager can share with the staff. But I do think that it is important for us, even if we work through the city manager, it doesn't preclude us. I don't think that it should preclude us from having somebody come in to do an evaluation of the unit itself. and then give us the information we need. We're seeking information to figure out what's going on, and that's where I am with this.
Commissioner Bush.
So, as I understand it, I think maybe what you were getting to, Commissioner Wingard, is that are we legally, contractually allowed to even do an evaluation of city climate? Or can we only say to staff, we would recommend hire a consultant and handle the climate? Now, that being one thing.
Well, I think it's just the discussion of like, if we ourselves, if I was to walk into City Hall and start going desk to desk to desk and start asking questions, no, that's not what's being, no, I know that's not what's being proposed.
Right.
But like as an extreme example.
Yes.
That as a very extreme example, that could be considered subversion of like our city charter or something. If I am giving direction,
sure.
to city staff, that could be a problem there. So that's where it's like if we were to proceed in that manner, if we were to create do something unto ourselves, I would want to just be careful of like if we as a body acted, how we went about doing that would just be very intentional. It just has to be very, again, carefully crafted. That's all I'm saying there.
I don't think that's my intention. My intention.
No, I don't think that's the intention.
So
Again, it's the extreme example to illustrate the point.
No.
Yeah.
My example, my recommendation would be, what I would support would be city staff you hire a consultant who deals with this, who deals with climate, studies. Now, we still have to evaluate the city manager, and we can do it maybe with a little more information than we had last year, because we've been thinking about this, but maybe that's something we can talk to the consultant about in terms of how we can proceed, because all of us here, well, I don't know, I'm sorry, I do not want to speak for everyone, but I know that several of us pointed out that when we got that form, we really didn't know what to do, and it just, it felt, first of all, I apologize, I wasn't very prepared to do it. I don't think we had done it, did we? No, we hadn't done it.
Not since.
So it kind of, so when I saw the questions, I don't think there was one that I felt like wasn't non-applicable for me, really, other than, it didn't even say, did the city manager provide timely, it didn't even say like the things that he does do that I appreciate. It just asked questions that didn't apply to my relationship with him. So that was my concern with it. So I would like to change some of those questions, but I agree that I would love to see city staff be directed to engage with the consultant. It's a good practice for organizations to do, even if you don't have any concerns, especially when there has been a lot of changes, and especially because Mount Pleasant's, we're trying to grow.
Do you have something new to add? Otherwise, I'd really like to curtail this
Yeah,
discussion a little bit. It's after 10. Do we have a direction for staff?
Yes, that's where I was gonna go
Okay.
with this, so,
Okay.
I can not say it, you can go forward with it.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
I like the suggestion from Manager DeSense and suggest that we agree to go that direction.
With a consultant.
Yes.
That's all I was gonna say. I think
Yes.
we just need to
Okay.
have a consultant.
Are we all in agreement on that?
The question then is, who identifies the consultant?
We do an RFP.
Okay.
And then we'd have to approve
And
that
then we'll
cost
have to
too,
approve
right?
And then we'd have to approve that.
And then we'd have
cost.
to approve that cost anyway.
Okay, that's, yeah.
Perfect, okay.
I would like to see the consultant too. Are we going to be provided with the information about?
Let's be done with it for tonight.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, when we do an RFP, they will be brought in and we will
okay.
go from there.
I'm okay. Thank
Okay,
you.
we're going to move on to announcements of city-related issues and new business. Commissioner Chapman.
I think the city celebration went really well this weekend.
Yes.
We were in the parade and I was, I don't know, third or fourth, and by the time I was done, there was still more people adding to the parade, like floats. And so I don't know how long it ended up going, but It was,
It went over an hour.
I thought it was wonderful, and I know Parks and Rec did a great job, and so yeah, and that tree, that was probably, I say about the all out of the $54 million that we're spending next year and the amount we spent, I think that tree was the best purchase we could have made.
That tree is awesome, yeah. And it can grow.
Right.
It can get
yeah.
bigger, yeah. Yes, we can add more panels onto it, just like the Christmas tree and the Nutcracker, where it gets bigger.
So yeah, so thanks to the staff for doing that. I think our community was well received, so.
Yeah, it was on Facebook.
Yes.
That's where I saw it. I
Yes.
was preoccupied with grading papers and other things, you know.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there any other announcements?
Tomorrow is International Human Rights Day. So
Okay.
some of the things we talk about address human rights for all. Okay.
Any other questions, any other comments, any other concerns? Okay. We're going to move on to public comment on agenda and non-agenda items. If you wish to speak at this time, you may step up to the podium. You'll be asked to state your name and address. Once you state your name and address, I will start the timer for 5 minutes.
Cynthia Kilmer, 219 North Lansing Street. My story is going to take more than 5 minutes, so I expect to be here more than once to tell this particular story.
Okay.
So it's a long night. You guys are doing great. You're doing great. I'm going to go back to the story of Becky Brown that I told before, who had a couple of pretty unfortunate episodes with the police. We're going to go back to her story for a minute. So she graduated from CMU, and she got a job with the law office. Isn't that great? It was actually my law office. I had a law office on Franklin Street. I hired 3 or 4 women. It was pretty much an all-woman office. 80% of what we did was through tribal court. So it was just sort of my area of interest. And my office was sort of decorated with like Indian baskets and native photography and things that people gave me. And most of my clientele were Chippewa people. So one day we had a young man who was very angry with our office, and Becky Brown sat in the only window in the whole office. We used to tease her that she had the best spot because nobody else had a window but her, which looked out on Franklin Street, and she loved that spot because she could see it. But it turned out not to be a great spot because, it left her vulnerable to people that were out and walking around. We had this young man who was angry. He was angry with me, but I was in court that morning and busy, and I wasn't there, so he was taking it out on Becky Brown. He was calling every 5 minutes, leaving nasty voice messages. He was sort of trying to extort us for money. He was demanding about $300. He was walking back and forth that window that Becky sat in, would make faces, would, give her the finger. He got his bike, he was riding up and down. He was, doing, and it just lasted forever. And this young man, it was very childish behavior, but, we were concerned because he had a history of domestic violence. He had beaten up romantic partners in the past, and he had actually pushed his own grandmother down a flight of stairs and broke her arm at one point. And the problem with our office, I really liked the office, but it had this mail chute in the front door, and we could lock the doors all day long, but all you had to do is stick your arm in the mail chute and you could unlock the lock. Now, I don't work there anymore, so I don't mind saying it, but, of course, we didn't tell a lot of people, but I think this young man knew that this was a fact, because when he was getting along well with everyone in the past, it was mentioned. So Becky Brown started to become fearful, I came back from court at some point, and I heard what was happening, and as I was in there, this young man came by again and put a note in the mail slot, and it was a death threat, is what it was. And Becky and myself and another female who worked there, the three of us were there. We all talked about what should we do with this man-child, I guess I'll call him, and we debated it at length, and finally we decided, I guess we're gonna call the police. We hated to do it, but we're gonna do it because, I frankly wasn't afraid of him, but Becky was. And she said so. So, I call 911, and I get a call back from Angela Brown, Officer Angela Brown, who had so badly frightened me earlier. And she said, okay, well, screenshot me the death threat. And I'm like, okay, for those who know me, that's kind of laughable because I'm the worst person at technology that ever existed. I didn't at that time, I know what a screenshot is now, but I didn't then. And I'm just like, huh? Yeah, well, just screenshot it to me, and I'm like, how do I do that? And I said, it'd be better if you would come here, because here's what I was thinking. I was thinking if a police car pulled up, he would see the car in the parking lot right outside of our office, right? And he'd be like, oh, shoot, I better leave them alone because there's the car. Has it been 5 minutes?
It's been 5 minutes.
I will pick up this story later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Margin Oakstein, 1361 South Crawford. I don't want to spend a lot of time, but I've been spending a lot of time on Southwest Corner. And now I'm moving over to Vites Woods, and I just wondered if something's happening with that bike route thing for that there possibility of going through. I hope the city isn't going to ignore the wishes of the Dow Foundation and their no wheels as part of their gift to the city, but I haven't heard anything since then, and I don't know what they're doing. And now I'm getting ready to figure out what the school is going to do next.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak at this time? Would anybody like to motion for adjournment?
I'd make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
We are adjourned at 10:16.
All right.
Past my bedtime.